This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. 4 days in a row for Lisa Mateo.
All right, that's solid.
She was here Labor Day and showed up for the rest of the week as well. Jobs Day tomorrow, and with Ed Hyman coming up here in the 8 o'clock
that's going to be big.
hour, a really important reset after what you saw yesterday.
Exactly, Tom. So we'll get initial jobless claims today, but as you mentioned, Tom, the big data point I think for the marketplace and for the Federal Reserve would be the change in non-farm payrolls. Anything on the weaker side would suggest, gee, maybe this Fed needs to be a little bit more aggressive here. And what does that mean for the economy?
We'll get to the data in a moment, but West Texas Intermediate, American oil under $70 a barrel really is a headline statistic today. Okay, this is the mother of all roll-ups. It's not a specialty chemical company. It's not a bank. There are a lot of banks rolled up and kept guys like you in business, Paul. Frontier Communications started in Minneapolis 1 million years ago, then incorporated in Dallas. The way I know Frontier is Frontier Communications of Rochester, hunks of Verizon, hunks of AT&T, and then just, a troubled path into bankruptcy, comes out of bankruptcy, and there's a mating this morning in our busted phone system. Yeah,
Verizon agrees to buy Frontier for $9.6 billion in cash. I think you throw the debt in there. The enterprise value is about $20 billion. Yeah. And I guess, I'm just looking at the Bloomberg reporting here, Bloomberg News reporting, and it says, they're trying to get bigger in fiber assets to add more internet services and so on and so forth. But I'm looking at Craig Moffett, Tom, at Moffett-Nathanson.
Did you see that?
He came out with a research note this morning and says, quote, for Verizon, this would be a bold step in the direction of convergence, which is, in our view, an absolutely atrocious idea.
Yeah, so, atrocious was used.
Exactly right. So, the question is, does this do for Verizon what it needs, which is to bulk up its footprint? And he's suggesting, Craig Moffett, that not so much.
We'll have to see. We'll get Mr. Nathanson, Mr. Moffett on here as we can. We say good morning on YouTube, out on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. They sent me, my people sent me the August numbers, but I haven't opened them yet.
Okay, all right.
I used to have an intern that opened those emails, but the intern went back to school. We say good morning, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto as well. In Washington and New York, good morning across this nation. And a special good morning. And I'm mourning, spelled differently.
Yeah.
M-O-U-R.
Okay.
And I'm mourning the Boston Red Sox. It's over. Christopher Smith, Mass Live, just said forget it. Devers, 40 minutes in a trance in front of his locker.
Exactly.
I don't 500 ball.
Yep.
Lenny Dykstra hit that ball last night. And it just kept going.
Kept going.
So, that was 1986. Exactly. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa, she loves a Mets Mateo.
Oh, and my condolences to you. Good morning. Yeah, we have little movement in futures. This is ahead of today's weekly jobless claims data, also tomorrow's non-farm payrolls report. Yesterday's reading on U.S. job openings, well, that trailed estimates. And also the Fed's Beige Book survey, that showed flat, declining economic activity. So this morning we have NASDAQ futures, little change, down about a point. Dow futures up about 0.1%, 48 points. S&P futures up about 0.1% or 5 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.77%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.77%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, Brent futures heading for the first day of gains in 5. Right now, Brent crude at $73.21 a barrel. That's with OPEC Plus getting closer to that agreement on delaying an increase in oil production. Shares of Verizon, yes, we talked about this. Communications higher, up nearly 1%. The company officially agreed to buy that rival telecommunications operator Frontier. All cash deal valued about $20 billion. Frontier, though, down about 8%. And Nvidia responding to a Bloomberg report that it was subpoenaed by the Justice Department. The company says, yes, it has been in contact with the agency, but it said it hasn't been subpoenaed as part of that antitrust investigation. Shares right now up about 0.5% of Nvidia. And moving the market, software company C3 AI down 18%, reported subscription revenue for the first quarter weaker than expected. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us now in a really important, timely start to the morning, Deborah Cunningham is with Federated Hermes and is expert on short-term paper. Deborah, you're at a weekend gathering here as we prepare for a Steelers football season, the Pirates with an exciting pitcher and all that. And at the barbecue, somebody says, which CD should I buy? Deborah Cunningham, which CD is most efficacious into 2025?
Boy, it's hard to say, Tom, because the market is overdone at this point, in our opinion. So I would say you're probably, if you're buying a CD, pick something that maybe has some value, a little bit of value right now. That's probably in the 1 year area, maybe even shorter, maybe 6 months, because you're probably going to have an opportunity to lock in a similar yield once the market regains its footing and takes away some of the overzealousness with the employment reprints that we'll see throughout the rest of this year. And, you'll be able to keep that yield for a longer period of time by locking in, something a year or shorter, because 2 years underpriced and overvalued at this point.
So, Debbie, what do you think our Federal Reserve is going to do coming up on September 18th? I mean, we're going to get some labor data today and, of course, the non-farm payroll data tomorrow. How aggressive do you expect our Federal Reserve to be come September 18th?
Well, we think the 25 basis points for each meeting, September, November, and December, is baked in.
Oh, okay.
And what it takes for the Fed, we've had long discussions about what it takes for the Fed to not go 25 in September, either nothing at all or 50 basis points. And it's a pretty broad range. In order to go 50 basis points, it's our opinion that we need a payroll print that is somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe zero or negative. Oof. And a payroll print on the other side to get them to, go 50 or to go 0 basis points needs to be astronomical, 500, 600, 700,000 jobs. So our expectation somewhere in the, 200,000, 150 to 200,000 job range, which is consistent with the new average, is where we think the market will sort of normalize itself and go back to 25 basis points. I mean, the yield curve doesn't make sense unless you think there's a 50 basis point cut somewhere in the next 3 meetings. And that's just not our opinion.
Do you expect the Federal Reserve, when it begins, to kind of be consistent, 25 basis points every meeting, every other meeting? How do you think that the Fed will perform or kind of act over the next, kind of 12 months?
I think we end up at the same place on a terminal rate basis as the market is expecting at this point from our own view, and that's right around 3%, maybe a little lower, a little higher, but right around the 3% level. The difference is the market's pricing in basically a move every meeting for 2025 or close to that, depending on when the 50 basis point ones are enacted in the market's mind. And in our estimation, we're not in that type of pace. We're at a pace that starts with 25 each meeting this year, but then goes to every other meeting on a 25 basis point count. So get you to 3% in 2026, not 2025.
Right. Link your world into the elasticity of economic growth if we get lower interest rates. Can we, sitting here over a Dunkin' Donuts of my choice, can I say, Deborah Cunningham, that if I get lower interest rates, I get a little bit more economic growth? Does that relationship work?
I think the relationship works. It's not a one-to-one, Tom, but I think it's there. I think what you also have to consider, though, is with interest rates in the 5% range, as they've been now for a year and a half, that is additive from an interest earned perspective to the economy. So if you take a 5% interest rate and the earnings based on that versus a 3% interest rates and the earnings based on that, you're actually subtracting a little bit. But the growth from an economic viewpoint, I think, outweighs that. So it's not a one-to-one.
Okay, Deborah Cunningham, thank you so much. Fed Editor Hermes, we're going to do a lot of this, a lot of short-term paper. Paul Sweeney really hangs on the 2-year yield, 3.77%. Where's the curve inversion right now? It's a little just teen sweens.
Yep,
negative.
teen sweens. Yep, one basis point.
That's CFA talk, folks. For
exactly.
Those that didn't. What I would note, first thing I looked at when I came in is the real yield. The 10-year real yield has not really moved so much given the turmoil that we see yesterday. Futures up 3 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Were warning signs missed before a teen allegedly shot up his high school in Georgia, killing 2 students and 2 teachers. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation said the shooter, a 14-year-old student at the school, was taken into custody after surrendering and is speaking with investigators. The GBI's Chris Hosey.
The weapon that was used in this was an AR platform-style weapon.
There is no known motive, and it is unclear how the teenager, identified as Colt Gray, obtained the weapon or got it into the school. He will be tried as an adult. Jillian Peterson is the executive director of the Violence Prevention Project Research Center.
There's typically a large number of warning signs leading up to these horrific events. So I think in this case, we'll be looking for what were the warning signs, what was missed, how do we do better in the future to not miss those signs.
Jillian Peterson with the Violence Prevention Project Research Center. Former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris on the road with the days dwindling ahead of next week's big debate. Trump fielding questions at a Fox News town hall in Pennsylvania painted a dark picture of the current state of the nation and blamed the Biden administration.
With these clowns that you have in there now, you're going to end up having World War III. If she gets in, I think we will have a depression, 1929-style depression. That's what I think will happen to our country.
Meanwhile, Harris called for a 28% capital gains tax rate on people earning $1 million or more.
We will tax capital gains at a rate that rewards investment in America's innovators, founders, and small businesses.
Harris spoke at an event in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Former Republican Representative Liz Cheney is endorsing Democrat Kamala Harris for president. Cheney said it's because of the danger that Donald Trump poses. Finally, tonight begins the NFL regular season. The Ravens will play at the Chiefs. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Do you just assume a Taylor show? I mean, is that what this is all about?
I don't know, because she's still on tour, so I don't know.
Are they still together? I
Yeah,
don't want to say anything rude here. Lisa, help me out. I mean,
I think they are.
They're
but
still in
Yeah, they're still together.
I don't know where her tour is, if they're still on tour. I don't know.
The Chiefs, once again, are like dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as you got Mahomey, you're in great shape, right?
Oh, yeah.
Mahomey.
They got a good
It's
team.
Mahomey.
Okay.
That's how you go.
By the way, give me a hug, because my wife wants to go to San Francisco, which we will, to see the 49ers play the Monday night game.
Really?
As a Lions fan.
When is this?
Nice.
Monday, because that's the Monday
This
night
Monday,
game.
you're taking the Gulfstream out to San
I'm
Francisco?
taking the Gulfstream up to see the 49ers host the Jets.
Nice.
Really?
That is solid effort there.
Is Mohammed going with you?
I am but I'm a Lions fan. You know, it's like, this is painful.
This is like Un-American.
Yeah.
Going out to Santa Clara.
I know.
That is a beautiful part of the
Where
world.
do you land at SFO with a Gulfstream, or do you land someplace
No,
secret?
they're going to go right into San Jose.
They're going to San Jose.
Yep,
It's
exactly.
huge.
Yep.
Michael Barr, 49ers Jets, Monday.
Gulfstream.
You and I have no life.
No,
I mean, I can't keep up. Futures flat. It is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer focuses the power of thinking on you, creating customized plans to help achieve your goals. Put the power of Oppenheimer thinking into your investing. Call an Oppenheimer professional today. All right, futures pretty much taking a breather after days of volatility. Investors, well, they're struggling with uncertainty over the health of the U.S. economy, also the pace of possible interest rate cuts. So right now we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.1%, 26 points. Dow futures, little change, up about 23 points, and S&P futures, little changed. We have the 2-year yield at 3.77%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.77%, and that's up about 1 basis point. Some deal-making news. Nikkei reporting that 7AI, that's 7-Eleven's Tokyo-based owner, they're going to send a letter to Canada's Couche-Tard saying that its offer price is, quote, insufficient. So right now, 7 and AI down about 1% in Japan. Couche-Tard down about 0.7% in Canada. Shares of U.S. Steel up 3%. Sources saying President Biden preparing to block Nippon Steel's $14.1 billion takeover of U.S. Steel. And then finally to earnings we go. Shares of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise down 3%, weaker than expected margins on its AI server business. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Out yesterday. Paul, thanks for driving it yesterday. I mean, it was out first day of school, very emotional.
Oh, yeah. I know.
I've been doing it a long time. I mean, it was 5 or 6 years ago that I took the oldest cash flow.
Yep.
First day to school. That was down on the edge of, Cape Cod and the Bourne Bridge. And, today it was emotional. For Wendy Schiller at Brown, it's emotional because she's got to stand up at the Taubman Center with all the idiot freshmen, and she has to sing Ever True to Brown.
Really?
We are ever true to Brown, for we love our college dear, and wherever we may go, we are ready with a beer.
Nice.
The people always say that you can't get out, drink the band with a scotch and rye and a whiskey dry and a BOURBON. Professor Schiller, thank you for joining us in the heat of orientation at Brown. What would you tell the freshmen right now, Wendy Schiller, about this debate September 10th in Philadelphia?
Well, I think it's the last key turning point for the election. I mean, I really do think this is a chance for Kamala Harris.
Whoa. This is too important. You're saying it's that much of a tip point?
I do, because I think it's the last time the unified America, theoretically, I know we're divided, but it's the last time that a lot of eyeballs will be on both candidates at the same time, unfiltered. So since that is the last time people who love Trump, like Harris, love Harris, hate Trump, hate Harris, but they'll watch the debate. It's entertainment now, and we know that the last debate was very pivotal for this race, pushing Biden out. So this is the last time everybody will watch at the same time with them face to face, rather than each of them lobbying charges against each other on campaign trail.
What do you think would be a win for Vice President Harris in this debate? It seems like everybody knows what former President Trump is all about, but less so for Vice President Biden.
A win for her would just to knock him off his game. I mean, he was on his game against Biden. He was on message. He didn't, except at the very end, maybe go off the rails a little bit. But generally speaking, he was on his game. He was disciplined. It was a message on inflation and the border. She seems to have injected a different scenario, a different set of issues into the race. Inflation matters, but now we hear signs that, maybe it's cooling and it's getting a little better. Right. So I think, she'll be able to deflect that. Will she get him to say something that is the point of no return for the independent voters who left him in 2020, but were thinking of going back to him? And that's what her goal has to be.
For this debate, which Professor Schiller, you make so important, will she speak as a liberal, or will she move to the middle? Is Reagan moved to the middle on the other side?
Well, we've seen already that she's trying to move to the middle. Her tax policy sort of is trying to occupy the middle. Price controls probably was not the middle. And she hasn't talked quite as much about that, as you can see from the reaction to those kinds of policy suggestions. If she can say as little specific about policy as she can, she'll come out having a good night in that debate, because she has to make people believe that she is not the very left Democrat that they have come to associate with the Democratic Party in one night against Donald Trump.
So if it's a policy-free debate,
yes.
Paul, what should we listen for?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know. But it will be entertaining, and I'm sure it'll get great ratings across the various networks. What is her strategy, do you believe, between now and the election? Because, boy, there's not that many days.
Well, so far, the strategy has been really to shore up and energize the Democratic Party base. And if you look at registrations across the country, the Democrats typically have advantages in that regard, and they are usually better organized on the ground. But Republicans are loyal. They get out the vote. Even if they don't love their candidate, they vote. And Trump enthusiasm still is very high. So the Democrats to even have a chance, have to really match that energy in the base. And that's been her strategy so far, and I think that's what the strategy will be going forward.
Amy Walter, in the Cook Report, publishing, I believe, yesterday, the day before, was really balanced. I mean, she said this is by no means tilting to either candidate, and she spent a good part of the essay talking about the things President Trump needs to do. Is he listening to his staff?
Well, we don't know who on his staff he's listening to. And I think Amy Walter's exactly right. So when it's a jump ball election, turnout among your base or even mildly affiliated voters is absolutely essential. And what we're seeing in the polls is fascinating, that Georgia is competitive again with Harris at the head of the ticket. Arizona still seems to be leaning Trump, and Nevada, with labor as strong as it is still, jump ball or leaning a little bit Trump. And that's a warning sign for the Democrats. But North Carolina seems to be within a margin that's even closer than it was for Biden in 2020. So she has sort of mixed up the map in the sense that she's competitive in states that weren't competitive 2 months ago, but she is trailing in states the Democrats, you think, would be doing better than they are. And that is worrisome for the Democrats.
I mean, Paul, Amy, I don't want to go into this because I'm not the numbers guy like Gura, but the answer is Trump is doing a lot better now than he did in 2020. It's just Harris is doing better than Biden. But this idea Trump is failing is just flat out wrong.
Exactly. So, Wendy, I'm actually kind of thinking post-November 5th. Are both parties, both campaigns preparing for what I guess, and a lot of folks are saying, will be a contested election?
I think this is going to be contested in ways that even are beyond 2020. And we hope we don't have a repeat, of course, January 6th. But the House and the Senate have to certify this election on January 6th again. And if the House is Republican, you can imagine, because the Republican Party has moved even closer to Trump than it was 4 years ago, there's a possibility they just will not certify the election. The Senate will likely certify it, whether it's Republican or Democratic controlled, but the House may not certify it. And then what do we do? It's one thing to vote against it. It's another not to certify it. So this is going to be a contested election. This is going to be fought out. And I think I don't see the Republicans conceding.
Right.
And the Senate will probably flip to the Republicans slightly. The House is still a jump ball. And the House becomes so important because they get sworn in on the 3rd of January, and they will determine January 6th. Pre-orientation,
Professor Schiller, just be sure you serve Narragansett. It's a lager beer. Wendy Schiller is at Brown University giving us great perspective. Paul, the yield space yesterday, boy, the nominal yields came in 3.76.
Yep.
David Rosenberg with a blistering note this morning just saying, he goes, I'm sorry, I'm a bond bull. We're going to drive lower. Is anybody prepared for that? I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, the 2-year Treasury, 3.76. The 10-year Treasury, 3.76%. I mean, it's been a long time since we've seen that. And people like Ira Jersey are talking about bull steepeners, where you get a little bit of a steepening of the yield curve with short-term rates coming in. We'll see.
In West Texas Intermediate, 69.44. OPEC scrambling. Javier Blas on the watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the question is, demand. I think a lot of folks are just concerned about demand out there, particularly from China.
I don't have perspective on this, folks. I mean, I do, but I don't. Mr. Macron in Paris, he names Michel Barnier as France's new prime minister. I believe that's a surprise just coming across the Bloomberg. We'll have that for you on 99.1 FM Washington, Bloomberg 1130 AM on New York, and 92.9 FM Boston. Good morning, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
In the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures ahead of more jobs data out today and also tomorrow. So right now, NASDAQ futures, little change down about 3 points. Dow futures up about 52 points. S&P futures up about 5. We have the two-year yield at 3.76%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.76%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, we have spot gold higher, 2,516 an ounce. Want to turn to oil. Brent crude, $73 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. companies making news. That's Tesla. It plans to launch its advanced driver assistance system in China and Europe in 2025. That's if they get regulatory approval. Their shares up nearly 3% this morning. And Jeep says it's going to resume production of the Wrangler, Jeep Cherokee SUVs in the U.S. today. Shares of its owner Stellantis, they're up about 0.5%. And move over battery-powered cars. BMW plans to start selling hydrogen-powered vehicles in 4 years. That's with Toyota. They're hoping that partnership is going to help drive down the cost of it. BMW up 1% in Germany, Toyota down 2% in Japan. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Good morning. In the autumnal glow, Block Island.
Really?
You ever been to Block Island?
No.
Very cool. Very,
All
very
right.
cool.
I'm sure.
It's not anything like the Hamptons or Nantucket or the Vineyard.
Yep,
It's its own beast. And there is the National Hotel. I've been saying, with a new signal, 92.9 FM.
Boom, we're right
Boston.
in there.
We're from Millinocket to Block Island.
All right, perfect.
You know where Millinocket is?
No, of course not.
North.
Okay.
Way north.
Okay.
Like you're coming in from London over Nova Scotia.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Millinocket.
Yep.
Good morning across New England on 92.9
Very good.
FM. Good morning to those at the National Hotel, Block Island. This is an important conversation, particularly for global Wall Street, on economics, finance, investment, and the dynamics of the equity market. Mike Green joins us now with Simplify Asset Management. When you walked in, we were talking about what always happens, which is short covering. Explain what that is and what's the distinction this time.
Sure. So when we typically see these types of risk-off environments, there's two things that are happening. One is people are selling, and the second is people that had borrowed shares in anticipation of prices declining buy back those positions. When you see the sort of violent reversals that we've seen since July, it's causing those portfolios to be forced to unwind both their long positions and their short positions. And this is why you've seen things like value or small stocks take a run. We're just not seeing that much of it in this episode of Risk Off. It feels like there's been a substantial quantity of de-risking already done.
We saw 30, the VIX mark 30 is sort of like a Lehman mark from 2009, whatever. We went out to 60 in early August. Nowhere near that. Yesterday we got to 23, now 20.45. Is this a mini early August, or is there a different character to it?
Well, I think a lot of people have set themselves up or are concerned about the negative seasonality of September, right? And Mark Twain, I think, said it best. September is one of those months that's particularly dangerous. The others being January, February, March, April,
thank you. Yeah. It's like selling May and go away.
Exactly.
That worked out, please.
So when we're looking at, I think, what is actually happening right now, it really is just a combination of people being anxious ahead of the election, being uncertain about what the policies that are going to emerge, and candidly waiting to figure out whether Jerome Powell is going to start cutting incomes for those who have really enjoyed the money in their money market funds.
So what is our Federal Reserve going to do? What do you think they should do come September 18th?
Well, so I'm in a bit of a pickle because I candidly think the problem is that the Federal Reserve hiked too far. And so the debates around cuts are somewhat academic. They've said they're going to cut. They absolutely are going to cut, whether it's 25 or 50. I'm not really sure that's going to help the levered household or young college graduate who is now struggling with a delinquent auto loan. Right? Once credit goes over the cliff, it's a phase change. You're banned to the wilderness for 7 years under credit reporting. And so we're looking at a sizable fraction, particularly of young people, that have been really adversely affected by these policies, even as they've transferred a lot of money to the wealthy. Now, cutting interest rates is probably not going to help those who are right at the edge. And yet it could cut the incomes of those who are enjoying the 5+ % interest rate in their money market funds.
So again, you could sit there in a 2-year Treasury at 3.8%. Where are you allocating capital these days?
That 2-year Treasury at 3.8% is maybe aggressive, but I don't think it's crazy at this point. And I just want to highlight for people, 3.8% on a 2-year Treasury would have felt like nirvana 5 years ago.
Sure.
All right, so we've come a long way, baby, is kind of the easiest way to put it.
So again, in the equity markets here, I mean, Tom's been in the Magnificent Seven. He's been just clipping coupons for the last few years. How about the rest of us here? Where do we find, I don't know, in the equity markets, where do we look for value? Do we stick with the big ones? What do we do?
So this is definitely one of these things that has been a challenge, right? And I would point out that really we've seen a broad inflation across valuations. So every stock is more expensive given where we are in the cycle versus history. I was just looking at General Motors, for example, trading at 5+ times earnings. Seems super cheap until you think about the cyclicality and the changeover that's going to occur in the fleet and the uncertainty around electric vehicles and self-driving vehicles, et cetera, in the next cycle. It's really hard to say that that deserves a premium multiple at these interest rates. 5 doesn't sound like a premium, but they are over-earning in that context. So the simple point that I would make is everything has been pulled up. And I think what we're seeing to a certain extent is this bid for safety. Get me to stuff that I'm fairly confident the cash flows aren't going to deteriorate sharply.
Well, that goes to the terminal value. You know, let's not do DCF. It's not DCF Thursday. We do that on Tuesday. But the answer is, I would suggest the timeline pros have out, say, 7 years, has been pulled in dramatically. Yes. How far has it been pulled in? Don't tell me, October, but how far?
Well, this is actually one of those super interesting things. This is that duration had bifurcated in the market. The presence of 0-day options meant that I could ensure what happens tomorrow. And so we'd see exceptional bids for single-day volatility around a Jerome Powell speech or a CPI press release. There's very little bid for that kind of 30 days out because I can ensure that with a series of 0-day or 1-day options. I can get that specific date. The long end is kind of where we're starting to see a little bit more questioning coming in. And the other thing that really happened in the last month or so is the relative popularity of those 0-day to expiry options were hammered by the unavailability of them on August 5th, I believe the day was.
Oh, that's right.
So there's been a real change, I think, in some of the tone that's happening. People are looking increasingly out to that traditional 1-month VIX, which is why we're seeing that bid that we're pointing out.
Well, the VIX, I mean, Tom keeps us on our toes with the VIX here. I mean, we had that crazy August 5th. We spiked to over 60, then we got down below 20. Here we are sitting at 20. What should our listeners and our viewers, what should they think about when they look at the VIX?
Well, so remember what the VIX is. The VIX is very specifically the price of options on the S&P index 30 days out, roughly 30 days out. One that had been under-demanded because nobody was looking for hedges out there. And even more than that, there had arisen a trade that's called the dispersion trade, right? So remember the S&P is composed of 500 names. There's theoretically a trade you can create where I buy the options or sell the options on each of the individual names and sell the index or buy the index options, right? So I can replicate that portfolio. That trade had gotten remarkably large heading into August 5th. And really what we saw was just an unwind where there was a huge bid to cover those index options that people were short. So this is a very technical phenomenon. It wasn't necessarily an economic phenomenon. Now the question is, does it begin to morph from a sentiment standpoint into something like that?
Who does those trades? Is it hedge funds out there? Is it Morgan Stanley's proprietary desk, if there is one anymore? Who does those trades?
All of the above.
Okay.
Those trades are increasingly popular both across wealth management and hedge funds.
FT had a great summary of the equity business on Wall Street. It was almost an allusion back to what it was decades ago. Is everybody going to really compete once again for prime brokerage? And we got over, what was the fraud at Credit Suisse? Archegos. So now that we're beyond Archegos, we're all going to dive back in the prime brokerage pool?
That's really an interesting question, and candidly, we don't know the answer yet. Anytime there's money, people are going to dive in that pool. On the flip side of that, I would point out that business has really structurally changed. The dominance that used to exist around share lending from those prime brokers has largely been outsourced to the Vanguards and BlackRocks. So it's a very different world.
So if I need Krispy Kreme donut this morning, I go to Vanguard.
You go to Vanguard. They'll lend it to you more cheaply than anyone.
News Michael Barr can use. Mike Green, thank you so much. There, get your Krispy Kreme from Vanguard this morning. Mike Green is with Simplify Asset Management. A little green on the screen. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, the VIX 20.51 comes in. Almost like, Mike, you got to get up here at the flight because we got to set Barr down. Michael Barr is going out to San Francisco on the Gulf Stream. Mike Green, it's too much. 49ers Jets on Monday. Okay, you got to show Mrs. Barr's on the starboard side of the plane. The views are great. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Those views going out west.
And keep in mind, I'm a Lions fan. That's all
you
all need to know.
It is torture. We know.
I love my wife.
At least till Tuesday. Futures up 4. Dow futures up 51. A little red on the screen on the NASDAQ. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Georgia authorities say the 14-year-old shooter at Appalachian High School in Winder, who allegedly killed 2 students and 2 teachers, used an assault-style weapon. Investigators say the suspect, identified as Colt Gray, is being tried as an adult. Georgia Bureau of Investigation Director Chris Hosey provided some updates, including a report that Gray had been alerted to the FBI months ago for alleged threats against his school.
The FBI referred this information to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office for action. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office identified and located Gray, who is our suspect in this case. They conducted an investigation at that time, and there was no probable cause for arrest or to take any additional law enforcement action.
GBI Director Hosey says 9 others who were wounded are all expected to survive. The suspected gunman surrendered and is cooperating with investigators. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have agreed to the ABC debate rules and will take the stage next week. The candidates' microphones will be muted when it's not their turn to speak. Trump in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania last night for an event hosted by Fox News said his debate strategy will be to let Harris talk. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced a crackdown on efforts by the Russian government to influence the 2024 election. Garland announced an indictment filed against 2 employees of the Russian state media agency known as RT, accused of publishing content deemed favorable to the Russian government. Garland also says the department is cracking down on fake websites.
Over the next several weeks, task force representatives will be on the ground meeting with election workers. And in early November, both in advance of and after Election Day, the FBI will be hosting federal partners at its headquarters command center.
AG Garland says the DOJ seized 32 internet domains that Russian-sponsored actors have used. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. What I notice here, just staggered into Thursday, and granted, we're only 2-3 days back, is the quiet in the media space. I just don't buy it for a minute. I think it's set to explode, and we haven't really heard from Paramount or Warner Brothers or the rest of them. No. Even Disney. I mean, I just wonder what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I mean, they're just kind of trying to, again, they're all just trying, Tom, to figure out this, the profitability picture of the streaming business, because it's a little bit uncertain here for most of these companies. We know Netflix can make a lot of money in the streaming business, right, but for everybody else making that transition from, you know, the cable TV, pay TV ecosystem into the streaming thing has been really difficult, and it's not over yet. The transition is not over, and investors, I don't think, have much confidence that they have light at the end of the tunnel, so they're staying away from the media stocks by and large.
And the movies, I mean, has anybody seen the Reagan movie? I got an email from out west, just, you know, diehard Republican household. They just loved it. I think it's just a polarity, right?
I would love to see, because I love history, and I would just love to see it, you know.
See what Dennis Quaid does with it.
Yeah. Looks interesting.
We'll have to see, to say the least. We've got a very busy day. Let's pull it forward. Economic data today in less than 1 hour. Stay with us for that across YouTube, across all of our radio signal across the nation. But Paul, jobs day tomorrow sort of just sped up on us.
Yeah, here we are.
And I got some people saying, well, it may go one way, like job formation, and the market will turn upside down because there's not the gloom. And then the other is with revisions, you get some real gloom.
You do, and I think the expectation is that the labor market is still solid, however, not as strong as it had been. So a little bit of a cooling off there. We saw that in the JOLTS numbers just earlier this week, coming in pretty noticeably.
Just got a text. Thank you for listening, and I think it's Deluxebury, Massachusetts, 92.9 FM. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures treading water before the open. Traders kind of in this wait-and-see stance before more jobs data comes out. We'll get to the bond market. The 2-year yield, 3.77%, up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.77%, and that's up about 1 basis point. To currencies, I have to point out Japanese yen up about 0.1% at 143.57 against the dollar, where the euro, British pound stronger. Bitcoin down about 2% at 56,000. Few companies making news. Volvo, it scaled back its outlook. Rising tariffs hurt some of its models that are made in China. And if you remember yesterday, we just talked about it, abandoning its target of being fully electric by 2030. Its shares right now up about 0.1% in Germany. And police in China, they've detained 5 current former employees of British drug maker AstraZeneca, questioning about potential illegal activities. Their ADR is down about 2%. And we'll end off with luxury. Sources saying LVMH's Tiffany plans to downsize that more than 12,000 square foot flagship store in Shanghai. I guess luxury sales not doing so well there. ADR is down about 3%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Lisa, thanks so much. You know, I guess there's like tourism, like the Chinese people are going to Japan.
I think.
So I don't know what to do with it. I mean, I get the China numbers are grim.
Yep.
That's clearly what we've seen.
Yep.
But then when Japan's up 30% or 70%, I'm like, well, okay. You know, is a bag, Lisa, is a bag wherever you buy it?
No, it depends on the name of the person behind the bag. That's what it's all about.
And
you
the
gotta have that
geography?
name, and where you get it, I guess, you know, because where the currency is stronger or weaker.
Or they're not on Madison Avenue. They're not on Fifth Avenue. They're in Japan, I think.
I was on Madison Avenue by chance here yesterday, and it's bustling. A lot of stores moving around, some vacancies, you know, and all that. You know, we'll have to see.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages around the world, brought to you by IBKR. With the Interactive Brokers Forecast Trader, you can trade your views on key economic and climate indicators. Visit ibkr.com/forecast. Get started today. Lisa, are you doing back to school?
No, we did it like last week.
Kids are too old.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no back to school.
Mom, you don't
I
have
just
to
go
come.
shopping. That's all she wants. Her clothes.
Exactly.
Go shopping.
Back to shopping.
Get me some clothes. That's what she wants. Overseas trips. You know, we've been talking about tourism, right? Being so expensive so much, right? Well, now it could get a little bit more expensive because a lot of destinations are charging new or even higher tourist taxes. The idea is not new, but they're imposing new ones. So, for example, Iceland, big, hot, popular tourist destination.
Yeah.
This year, they reinstated their tourist tax that was suspended, so the rate of hotel stays doubled that they usually charge. For the first time, they're doing this tax for cruise ships that are stopping at ports. If you want to go to Bali, that's going to cost you more because they set a tourist tax of $9.70. That's going to be started to implement. Places like Barcelona, Venice, New Zealand, Amsterdam, Britain. So they're all kind of increasing their tourist taxes to make it a little bit more expensive when you go visit.
Well, it's because they raised them. I mean, there are taxes, and they're just, nobody cares. They're like a rounding error, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because in Barcelona you had all those protests about people not wanting the tourists there. So
yes, because I mean, for a while, the last couple of years, all the young people I know all went to Barcelona, and I don't know why.
Oh, it's a cool place. Yeah,
and it's always been a cool place.
It's on my list.
Why is it not Paris? Why isn't everybody's going to Barcelona? I don't get it.
It's like, you know, they don't want me there.
All right.
There's no bow ties in
There's no bow ties in Barcelona.
Somebody said, you know, why don't I have a bow tie today? And I don't have a bow tie today because I left it on Mrs. Keene's desk because she got me a new bow tie and I forgot to get it.
You forgot
I went down in flames.
not good.
It's called the divorce lawyer. I don't know. Next.
But you got the Red Sox jacket, so
Yeah,
that makes up for it.
Yeah, we won't talk about that.
Best colleges, speaking of, families, kids, best colleges in the U.S. for 2025. Wall Street Journal came out with their list. A lot of parents kind of look to this. They rank it in measures of how well each college sets graduates up for financial success, which is what you want. So Princeton took the first place spot, second year in a row, high graduation rate, great alumni network. That's what they said. Babson College came in second for its real college, real world experience. And Stanford, that came in third. But the thing is, a lot of them, about half of the colleges in the top 50 are new because they started to survey a little bit more of students, recent graduates to get their insight into it. So some new schools like Brigham Young University in Utah, that came in first as most recommended by students. And you had Dalton State College in Georgia, second, Rose Coleman Institute of Technology in Indiana, that came in third. So
there's been a lot of criticism about it. To see Babson, Good Morning Wellesley on 92.9 FM. But to see Babson in there sandwiched by Princeton and Stanford, I guess
pretty solid.
That's pretty good.
Babson admissions today, they haven't, that's a good day.
I saw in one, University of Delaware comes in at 26. I've always been impressed by the University of Delaware.
Oh, it's a cool
Taking
school.
my kids down there to take a look at it.
They have a statue of Liz Ann Saunders.
They do.
It's amazing.
Guess who's number 28? Texas A&M University.
It is. College Station, Texas, although they're number 20. They're like on the -20 NCAA football list. Whatever happened.
I don't know.
You go
Santa
down,
Clara University,
you
38.
do join the Corps of Cadets at A&M. Next, what do you got?
Larry the cat could be causing some issues, over at 10 Downing Street. Been there since 2011. He's going to get rid of some of the rats and stuff. He's 17 years old already.
Wow.
Outlasted 5 prime ministers, but now you have new British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, coming in, and he has a few cats. There's Jojo, a male ginger cat, who has not met Larry. He's bought a new kitten too, a Siberian kitten. He wanted a German Shepherd, didn't work out. He went for the cats. But everybody's wondering, and now people are starting to talk, how are these cats going to adjust to Larry? Or how is Larry going to do it? Because Larry's lashed out at a few past cats before from other
Well,
primates.
they have to do this correctly.
So that's what the
get
article
the
is
Duke of
about.
Norfolk involved.
It's in the journal. They have these certain ways how they can do it and what they have to do to kind of go about it. So they have experts talking about it. But I never really thought about that much. But Larry could be a troublemaker.
They get old.
Larry doesn't want to deal with other things. He's very territorial.
What else we got?
And so what else we got? Bankrate has this new survey. It shows that inflation, credit card debt, it could be pushing consumers to spend less for their holiday shopping this year. So not sure if you got the Christmas list from whoever is on your list, but people want to spend less. So 33%
Don't we do this
expect
every
to
year?
spend less.
Every year when the Red Sox give up, we decide Christmas is going to be terrible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's September.
But people have been shopping, it says, since August. So people already started.
For Christmas.
For Christmas.
No.
I don't.
I'm behind the 8 ball. I don't know what's going on.
I don't know.
Okay. Doug emails in. Thank you, Doug. He says, check the tuition at BYU.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons it's successful.
Awesome. Good for
Are you done, or you got one more?
That is it.
That is it. Tell us about the Bahamas. Elisa Mateo, just in the Bahamas, without giving away family secrets here. I mean, was it like you'd go back?
It was really good. We had a good time. The weather was great until those last couple of days. But we just had a good time. Did a lot of excursions. Like we went into the caves and did all that. Did some, what do you call that, with the paddling, the kayaking?
Yeah,
did some
sea
of that
kayak,
too.
sea
Kayaking.
They were like swimming, or are they like sharks?
No, they're pretty good. They're pretty good.
Well-behaved sharks.
Well-behaved sharks.
What's the beer down there?
And the Kalik, I think it's Kalik.
Kalik.
Yes,
okay.
I think that's how you spell it.
So you learn something every day at
Yeah.
Bloomberg Surveillance.
My son was pounding him down.
Oh, really?
Yes,
That's good to
he
know.
likes. You tell him they get a free trip, they're right on board.
Very cool. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. Lisa Mateo with our newspapers. Out on YouTube, the statisticians, surveillance statisticians, that's a mouthful, just sent the YouTube numbers. I'm going to look at them right here on the break. Really excited about that. YouTube, we're just killing it. Thank you so much for your attention there. You subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. You're in your car, Bloomberg 1130, 99.1 Washington, 92 FM in Boston, and across this nation on Apple CarPlay. You know what you do? You get to the office, and you just tune it up on YouTube.
Sure, right there.
Right through the morning. Alex Steele and Paul Sweeney, the 10 a.m.
We're going to be up on the 6th floor today. We got a conference up there for
you're migrating up to the
power players that Bloomberg has. So we're going to be Grant Hill from Duke, Mr. Rubenstein, also
Very
from Duke.
Cool.
A lot of
Orioles discussion. Yep. The Cars. Drive safely.
And talking in your sleep. I guess you're just what I needed. Just what I needed. I needed someone to feed. I guess you're just what I needed. Just what I needed. I needed someone to
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. And Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo on YouTube, across this nation on radio. Good morning. 99.1 FM Boston, Bloomberg 11.30 New York, and across New England, 92.9 FM Boston. We say good morning and welcome all of you on a just enormous, big signal. In New England, 92.9 FM in Boston. Red and green on the screen after what we saw yesterday. And Paul, I think the lead observation this morning is yesterday was not like the carnage of early August.
No, it wasn't. I mean, we had the VIX obviously back there in early August 5th, explode out to north of 60. Here we've got the VIX sitting right here, just north of 20 here, Tom. So again, it's economic data is going to be coming up today with some jobless claims, tomorrow with the non-farm payrolls, and that will inform, to some degree, kind of how aggressive the Fed's going to be come September 18th.
Craig Sterling gets us started here strong in a moment with a Monday, and then Ed Hyman will join us for an extended conversation. Really looking forward to that. Ed Hyman on a nation perhaps near recession. Again, red and green on the screen. Key item for me across the Bloomberg Launchpad: equities, bonds, currencies, commodities. West Texas Intermediate $69.52. It's up 32 cents, but still under $70 a barrel. Brent crude, $73.15 a barrel. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got little movement in futures. This is ahead of today's weekly jobless claims data. Also tomorrow's non-farm payrolls report. Yesterday's reading, U.S. job openings, well, that trailed estimates. The Fed's Beige Book survey that showed flat, declining economic activity. So right now, NASDAQ futures down about 0.2%. Dow futures up about 13 points. S&P futures down about 3 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.76%. Little change. The yield on the 10-year, 3.76%. And that is little changed as well. To commodities, Brent futures heading for the first day of gains in 5 right now. We'll check in with Brent crude futures up about $73 a barrel. WTI crude at $69 a barrel. Shares of Verizon, they're higher, up nearly 1%. The company officially agreed to buy rival telecommunications operator Frontier Communications. All-cash deal valued at about $20 billion. Frontier shares down about 9%. Nvidia responding to that Bloomberg report that it was subpoenaed by the Justice Department. The company says it is in contact with the agency. It has been, but it hasn't been subpoenaed as part of that investigation. Shares up about 0.1%. And moving the markets, that software company C3 AI down 19%. Subscription revenue for the first quarter weaker than expected. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thank you so much. Out of Washington University, St. Louis, and Booth School, Chicago, Craig Sterling has a sterling career here off of UBS, Credit Suisse, and now at Amundi at US. He briefs this morning. He's head of US equity research. Craig, you don't mince any words about it. I mean, sectors, healthcare and others, energy doing better. Is it outright avoid the Mag 7, the Mag 8, or do you still participate?
I think you mostly avoid it if you can. I mean, right now, we've seen, really since July 11th, the rest of the market's getting its legs. You know, we had a one-way market for about 18 months. And the reason that happened was those were the only stocks that demonstrated earnings growth, while most of the rest of the market had trouble with the aftermath of COVID, worries about cyclicality, inventory drawdowns, et cetera. But a lot of that, the valuations are stretched. And now what we're finally starting to see is earnings for the rest of the market start to not accelerate, but I think the earnings growth of the rest of the market will cross that of the Mag 7, Mag 8, whatever you want to call it, fourth quarter this year, first quarter next year. I mean, the rest of the market had negative earnings growth for a while, and now that's reversing. So the market will often pay for what it can see. And when you have such macro uncertainty, the market really rewarded what the Mag 7 did. And now we're starting to see the rest of the market start to demonstrate some positivity.
All right, let's talk about the rest of the market here. If we're starting to get a little bit of visibility here, what are some of the sectors that maybe kind of stand out for you and your friends at Amundi?
Yeah, well, first thing, you need to be careful. You want to find value, and the multiple of the equal weighted market is like 18, the Mag 7's north of 30, and the S&P is 23. And the issue with value in a very uncertain macro environment is you need to find a path to value, because things can stay cheap for a long, long time. And what you want to really look for is where earnings has been de-risked. So, we don't want to bet on the cycle, because if you bet on the cycle, you're probably going to be wrong, because it's been really unpredictable and probably will continue to. So you want to find sectors and companies that have something that will enable them to outperform the cycle, so that you're not just betting. So a couple areas, we like banks, we like materials, as far as those go. With banks, we think a lot of the issues that started to really rear their head a year and a half ago in March of 23 we're moving past it. Net interest margins are stabilizing. Investment capital market activities coming back. The regulatory concerns that seemed so serious a year or so ago seem like they're kind of fading a little bit. Right. Companies, particularly the big banks, are returning capital in a big fashion to shareholders. So these are just demonstrating through another crisis, banks are good businesses, and there's a stability to them, particularly the bigger ones, that they continue, that as we continue to move past the global investment crisis.
All right. Craig, we've got Ed Hyman coming up after you. Let me send up a question here that, of course, we'll ask Ed Hyman as well. Nick Timmeros in the Wall Street Journal has out the great chart today. This is very good mathematics, folks, from the New York Federal Reserve. It's got a fancy name, the Multivariate Core Trend PCE. But the answer is it actually went up last month. It went to 2.45 from 2.2. And the major value of the Wall Street Journal chart, Craig Sterling, is it looks like inflation may set at a higher level than pre-pandemic. Is that in your thinking, that there is a new regime of a higher inflation?
Yes, and that's a really important point. We've been thinking about this for a while. The old ceiling is the new floor. So you have industry, so that affects rates. So the era of free money and companies that are not profitable, just getting funded, that's over. Cyclicals, particularly materials, energy that have been capital starved for 10 years or so, they're going to get pricing power. Banks are going to have positive interest rates that they can actually make money from. So yeah, it's very, very true.
Healthcare, it's been a sector that was a pandemic darling, and but boy, it's been one of the worst performing sectors last year. Is it time to take a look at healthcare?
Yeah, we're overall, despite me calling out materials and banks, we're generally cautious on cyclicals because a lot of them, like consumer and industrials, have a lot of room for error. So we like defensives overall, in particular healthcare. So healthcare, to your point, they were darlings in COVID, and what they experienced after the peak of COVID was really a cyclicality of their business that healthcare never had, right? Like they're considered staple-like businesses, and they've been anything but for a variety of reasons in the last few years. So the post-COVID regime was pretty tough on them, but we're moving past it. And when we look at the market and we look at like where we're seeing earnings growth in the next, like say next year, it's probably going to be like 20% for the sector, which after tech, no one's higher. So despite all the politics and everything, these are, you want to look for innovation and good businesses, but it's a really good place to be right now, and the valuations support it.
Craig, thank you so much. Craig Sterling with a Monday this morning, a Monday U.S. There. And it is one part of the debate, not so much get out of Mag 8, but just it's over. You got to go find something else to do.
Yeah, and the question I think for a lot of folks is, if tech is not going to lead the broader market higher, what will? Because we've become accustomed to tech kind of.
Is anybody saying their revenues are going to tank, or their earnings or their margins? I haven't heard that yet.
No.
I need somebody informed, like Lisa Mateo, somebody else, to come out and tell me. Amazon, the number of boxes, envelopes, whatever of Amazon.
Never stops.
I live in a 6th floor walk up in New York, and it's amazing. The stack of boxes just gets bigger and bigger.
I'm always breaking down Amazon boxes. Yeah. That's kind of like one of my chores every day.
The Amazon box. But the thing is, I never order it. So the box comes and I'm like, who got it?
Mr. Mateo.
It's my husband, my daughter.
Do you get the hat trick where you carry in 3 boxes and they're all to children?
Yes.
That's called a hat trick.
Is that what okay, there you go.
Yeah. Red and green on the screen right now, the VIX 20.90. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Tips about an online post threatening a school shooting last year led Georgia police to interview a young teenage boy, but investigators did not have enough evidence for an arrest. Yesterday, officials said the now 14-year-old opened fire at a high school outside Atlanta, killing 4 people and wounding 9. Authorities say the teen, identified as Colt Gray, has been charged as an adult in the deaths of 2 Appalachia High School students and 2 teachers. Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith.
All of our victims that are at the hospital are going to make it and going to recover well, as we've been told, and we don't expect any more fatalities at this time.
Sheriff Smith says the suspect who surrendered is cooperating. Taxes and the economy are emerging as the key themes ahead of the first debate for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. The vice president is making a pitch for higher capital gains taxes as she fleshes out her economic policy. We get more with Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries.
We're, 2 months out, and there's been some questions about whether how she would differentiate herself from President Joe Biden. So maybe this is the start of that in the kind of home stretch of the campaign. She said she would like to see a 28% capital gains tax rate on people earning $1 million or more. That's down from the 39.6% rate that President Joe Biden had supported.
Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Former President Trump, meanwhile, has called for a series of tax cuts on corporations, individuals, and retirees. All of this comes ahead of next Tuesday's ABC News presidential debate. Our coverage begins at 8 p.m. Wall Street time on a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Television. President Emmanuel Macron has named EU former Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier as France's new prime minister after more than 50 days of caretaker government. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. I'm a complete amateur at French politics. Wait, I'm a complete amateur at U.S. politics as well. But I sort of got this right, Paul. There's Macron in the middle, two parties to the right, two parties to the left. Is a very amateur look at this. And what Macron did is to push against the far-right party. He picked Barnier, who's in that conservative party, one step to the right from where Macron is. And Barnier, at age 73, he's associated with Brexit.
Yeah.
He was the one that was the hatred of pro-Brexit crowd. But it sort of ended up with he tilted it conservative and key point away from the left. Well, I don't know what the left does this morning.
No, and I don't.
I think it deserves a trip to Paris.
I think it does. I mean, we can set that up.
I mean, surveillance from Paris, all October. I could see it.
I know some people over there.
I think we should do some research into that trip. They'll tell us to swim. From New York, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures still treading water. Investors continue to struggle with uncertainty over the health of the U.S. economy, also the pace of interest rate cuts. Just receiving some more economic data as well. We have ADP employment change for August. Survey was for an increase in private payrolls of 145,000, came in at 99,000. The prior was an increase of 122,000. That was revised down to 111,000. We have more on tap, 15 minutes minutes from now, we'll get initial jobless claims for last week. Then at 10 a.m., it's on to the ISM Services Index. Let's head to the bond market right now. The 2-year yield, 3.73%. That's down 2 basis points. A yield on the 10-year, 3.74%, and that's down 1 basis point. Deal-making news. Sources say 7AI, that's 7-Eleven's Tokyo-based owner, they're going to send a letter to Canada's Couche-Tard saying that its offer price is, quote, insufficient. We have 7AI down about 1% in Japan. Couche-Tard down about 0.7% in Canada. And some more insight into the Disney data that was leaked online by hackers earlier this summer. Wall Street Journal reporting it includes passport numbers for some Disney Cruise Line workers, Disney Plus streaming revenue figures, and also sales of Genie Plus theme park passes. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. For the next half hour, Ed Hyman joins us now, Chairman, Evercore ISI. And, of course, out with a must-read note. And it's almost comfort to me, Ed Hyman, to see your note and just observe that, the basic idea. You start like Alan Greenspan with trucking. Explain why at Evercore ISI, where everybody hangs on every chart and every paragraph, why does Ed Hyman start with a trucking survey?
Because it's the most important thing to start with. So we survey about 40 different industries. And you might ask yourself, which one correlates with the economy most? And the answer is trucking. The surveys overall, trucking, retail, autos, et cetera, overall beat trucking by itself. But trucking has the most.
Right.
And so, and that survey also has hooked down. I'm looking for message, signal.
Well, can you signal now the certitude of a recession or the when of NBER recession?
No. Yeah, I've been on the recession kick too long. So I'm trying to
wean yourself off of that, right?
Not wean myself off it. I'm just trying to. My job is to help our clients, and this has not been helpful. Now, at this point, the logic that monetary tightening, a la Milton Friedman, would make inflation go away has worked, and the yield curve being inverted should slow the economy, and we're getting some evidence to slow down, and so I should relax a little bit.
Okay. So, what do you think if you're? We're going to hear from the Fed in a couple of weeks. We're going to get some economic data today with jobs and tomorrow with the labor report. How do you think the U.S. economy is performing these days?
It's okay, a little spotty.
Okay.
Some places are just booming, not doing well, not holding up, not resilient. And some places are softer.
Right.
Like our trucking survey's gotten a little bit weaker, and construction is a little bit weaker, and some retail, particularly when you get into the lower income categories, are a little bit softer. And the employment data, which is the key, everybody knows that, but it's showing some signs of being softer.
We saw that with ADP, folks, and the markets move on at futures flat. Now futures, S&P futures negative 13, NASDAQ down 0.6%. The VIX was a 20 level, goes out to 21.22. The Sweeney yield 3.72% in 3 basis points, and the 2-year yield a little bit of disinversion here, a positive 2-10 spread. I haven't said that since the Red Sox last won. The real yield 1.67%. Paul, pick it up.
And talk about we're going to have the Fed presumably cutting rates and maybe substantially starting in September. What does that mean for the U.S. homeowner? I mean, the mortgage rates have been high, but not, and it comes to the point where nobody wants to sell their home because they don't want to go to a new home with a higher mortgage rate. Yeah. How do you think the housing market's going to react to what should be a declining interest rate environment?
It'll be good. Housing has had a real problem with lack of supply. And I find that everywhere.
Yep.
And we do a survey of home builders.
Of course you do.
And that picked up quite a bit.
Okay.
About 6 or 7 points on a 0 to 100 when mortgage rates came down. And then this week, it dropped 2 points.
Okay.
I don't know if it's noise. Lumber came down, so I'm trying to connect the dots. Like it might be a little bit of signal. But I don't get the feeling that, 25, 50, 75, 100 basis
Right.
point drop in mortgage rates, in the funds rate is going to do a lot.
Yeah, you've got a nodding acquaintance with Bowdoin University. I should say Bowdoin College up in Maine, but the real heritage is University of Texas. You have an inherent prism into the boom economy of Texas, of Arizona, and the rest. Where do you see that 5 years from now? Where do we just continue to see this migration from California, from New York, from Illinois, and the rest?
Probably. The tax situation's better. There's also a movement, particularly of young people, like the University of Texas, to get away from a woke environment in the Northeast, frankly. And that's
Right.
probably going to keep going on.
You've kept politics out of your newsletter, I would say, more
Yes.
than anyone else. You've been really, really good about that. So I'm going to quiz you now on how you
Let's keep it out.
You don't walk. Lisa, hold on to him. He's not walking out of the studio. Ed Hyman, how do you dance around this unique presidential election to give advice within your newsletter to your clients worldwide?
So it's a dance, and Evercore has its roots in the very democratic group of people as founders.
With Roger Altman and the rest.
Roger
right?
Altman and Ralph Schlosstein.
Yeah.
And they're terrific. And so I have to be a little careful as a Republican. You're not. It's their firm, and I don't want to get in the way. But as we all know, it's 50-50. And so it's too early to try and figure out what the economic
Right.
implications. Trump is giving a talk today here in New York at the Economic Club, and we'll pick a little bit up from there. I'm sure you'll be there, but
Big traffic. That's all I know.
Ed, we want to come back and continue this discussion with Ed Hyman. Are you a bull or a bear right now? Can you add cash to a belief in stocks right now?
my technical analyst, Rich Ross, who's been very good, he was very bearish. Now he says he's balanced. I don't know what balance means.
Right.
So I'm not particularly bullish or particularly bearish. I own a lot of stocks, own a lot of real estate. I'm nervous because things seem like they're too high, too expensive. It's not a good answer for you, Tom.
That's okay. We'll keep you on anyways. Ed Hyman with us here into the 8:30 hour. Economic data in 5 minutes, and then we'll continue with Ed Hyman of Evercore ISI. Futures negative 17, a little deterioration there off ADP. We'll see what we do with claims and productivity. Unit labor costs important, obviously, as well. The VIX 21.51. Paul, we haven't mentioned the dollar here. Churning is how I would put it.
Okay, you've got the DXY index just down a little bit slightly here today. I'm looking at the euro, Tom, a little bit stronger. Same thing here for the
some
sterling.
resiliency.
I know you're going over to
132.
Italy, so I'm monitoring the euro.
We're
for
monitoring
you.
that.
So we're monitoring that. 'Cause you're going to be over there doing who knows what. But
well, I'm going to climb the Spanish. Do you know you can't sit on the Spanish steps
can't do that anymore. Nope.
You get a 400 euro fine if you sit. It's un-American.
I know. That's what
you sit on the Spanish steps. We'll have to see.
Film there.
That. We're with Ed Hyman. We welcome all of you across the nation. 92.9 FM in Boston. Good morning. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red on the screen, and this is after ADP reported U.S. companies added fewer jobs in August, an increase of 99,000. And the forecast, it was for 145,000. The prior revised down to 111,000. Now from that, we move on to initial jobless claims for last week, and the numbers just coming in. The survey was for 230,000 applications, came in tick lower, 227,000. The prior 231,000, and that was revised up to 232,000. We have more economic on tap. 10 a.m. Wall Street time, we'll get the ISM Services Index. So let's see the reaction now. We have NASDAQ futures down 0.3%, 60 points. We have Dow futures little changed, up about a point. S&P futures little changed, down about 5 points. We have the 2-year yield 3.73%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.74%, and that's down 1 basis point. Few companies making news on top of all the data we're getting in. Tesla, they plan to launch their advanced driver assistance system in China, Europe in 2025. That's if they get regulatory approval for that. Their shares are up 2%. And Jeep said it's going to resume production of its Wrangler and Grand Cherokee SUVs in the U.S. today. Shares of its owner Stellantis, they're up about 0.5%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Ed Hyman with us. But first, folks, our economic indicators, brilliantly done by Lisa. Economic indicators brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with a 2-to-1 advisor to staff ratio, small firm attentiveness, big advisor impact. Go to commonwealth.com to learn about their consultative support and technology. Across economic data today, and of course into the jobs report tomorrow. I love doing this with Ed Hyman. Everybody thinks he's like on the phone with Jay. No, he's looking at, he's in here literally looking at claims as we start. Unit labor costs came in a little bit lighter. What do you say about wage growth moderating? Nominal GDP comes down. And then what do you say about the real wage? Are we going to get a negative real wage?
The wages look like they're really slowing, and inflation looks like it's really slowing, and productivity has been really good, and I assume it got revised up a little bit because the GDP was revised up.
Yep.
I don't have the revisions yet.
Should be out.
They'll be out in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
You see how Hyman, he's killing me.
And so unit labor cost, before the numbers was 0.5 year on year, just an increase of 0.5. And so inflation could be down to 2% without any trouble. And by some measures, it already is down to 2%.
Yeah.
So that ship has sailed.
So is the Fed late in cutting rates, Ed, do you think? Or because a lot of folks out there saying the Fed should have been cutting rates for months now.
They're smarter than I am.
Okay.
Are they too smart?
Could be too smart. I think the Fed has been doing a pretty good job, and I'm generally critical of the Fed.
Okay.
But either by luck or by skill, they have the path set now for cutting rates.
Mm-hmm.
And we got claims this morning.
Right in line.
So low, it makes me have a headache.
Yeah.
And so they got different mandates. So I don't necessarily think they should have. We'll know better the answer to that question. I do think that they were way off on raising rates. The transitory story I thought was
Is
bad.
Is it harder now, Ed Hyman, to do the craft? He's got this little tall table he stands at with a black, one of those markers that if you get on your shirt, you throw the shirt out.
Yep.
And he's marked. Is it harder to do it now because of the mystery of technology, the mystery of productivity, the polarization of the labor force in America, the haves and the have-nots? Is it harder to do now?
I don't think so. It's always been very hard to do.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So I'm not thinking it's any harder to do. than it has been in the past. It's just been always, very, very difficult. In some ways, the hardest time was in the 1970s. When you had the embargo, you had wage price controls, you had inflation going nuts, you had Nixon resigning.
Yep.
I mean, it was pretty.
What are your clients?
tough.
What are your clients asking you these days? That's maybe unique, or just what do they really want from you these days?
I think they want a steady hand, a unbiased analysis of what's going on. And so I try first to do that. You have the data on the ADP came out.
Yep.
It's 0 calories. It doesn't have any information in it whatsoever. It still moves the market, and we still look at it. Claims, on the other hand, are very important.
Right.
Yep.
I want to go to Economic Club of New York and the heritage here, Paul, and to paint the picture, folks. In the old days, you're in a huge ballroom in New York with the elite meet to greet, and the fancy people are up on stage trying not to eat until the speech is done. That's a tradition, and you're starving, and you're looking at your food going, when do I eat? And off to the wings, the left wing and the right wing, looking out at the people, the audience, are two worthies, and then with trepidation, the speaker knows they're going to ask questions. And often, and to the great joy of the Economic Club of New York, Ed Hyman is one of those worthies. You, Martin Feldstein, and others would ask really tough questions. You do that today with former President Trump. What is your question today at 12 noon to Donald Trump?
What are you going to do with taxes? Would be the main thing I would want to know.
Explain the distinction of the Harris tax policy as
I'm not
proposed
sure what it is.
or trial ballooned versus the Trump
It's
tax
too early.
policy. Fair.
It's too early. In the news right now, there's a debate. They say that Trump wants to take the capital gains tax rate up to 39%. Maybe it's Biden wants to take it up. And Harris wants to keep it at something more like 28%. But, as a conservative, I would rather keep it at, 21 or 22%.
Explain how the taxation of unrealized gains. Paul Sweeney bought Nvidia early. He's got a big unrealized gain, and he's not selling that puppy. And select individuals, including the senator from Massachusetts, wants to tax those unrealized gains. How does that harm not wealthy people?
I think it harms everybody.
Why?
Because it hurts the whole capitalistic system. And so, that's one of the things that I would find the most discouraging. It also is impossible to administer. So I don't think that's going to make it, but it definitely is low on my
broadly
list
defined,
of things that'd be good.
Broadly defined, where would you like to see the U.S. tax system go over the next several years? Because obviously, as you well know, there's many different different thoughts on that. Where do you think it should go?
I'm happy with it right now.
Okay.
I think we're paying enough taxes, and so I'm not interested in seeing taxes go up. And I don't get this sense that the Harris Democratic group really are pushing for higher taxes either. There's some parts are, but I don't.
How about I would love to get your perspective on the debt and deficits. I've been hearing about it my entire life. When do I have to worry about it? Yeah, you too.
Well, but you were directly involved with this with Pete Peterson, Paul Tsongas, Sam Nunn, and the others. I mean, some would say they've been crying wolf for years. We're still here. But are we at a tip point now that those people talked about it?
So I don't think so. But I think about it all the time. I had a deep conversation yesterday with Lee Cooperman, who's extremely upset about it. And I said, Lee, bond yields are so low and the dollar is so strong. Those are the two things that would make you say, this is now.
Right.
And it's not.
Take your work into John Gollob's work at Evercore. We've got to go here, Ed Hyman, but fold your economics into the Evercore ISI equity call.
So we've been on the equity call. We've been pretty bearish on the stock market, and so that's where I am right now. Mm-hmm. Frankly, we have a strategist and a technician that have different views.
Well, that's good. That's classic. That's a Hyman view.
Well, no, but I'm just saying I listen to them.
Yeah.
So right now the economy's fine. Earnings are good. Inflation's coming down. Fed's going to cut.
Right.
And it's okay.
Ed Hyman, thank you so much for being with us today here into the Jobs
Tom, nice
Report.
to see you.
Tomorrow. Nice to see you as well. And Ed Hyman with Evercore ISI, dancing around the politics of the moment. We'll speak to Mr. Hyman here through the autumn as we can. Futures negative 13, a bit of a deterioration off that economic data. ADP soggy, and their other data at 8:30 goes the other way. Bloomberg Surveillance brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Their portfolio analysts consolidate, analyze all your financial accounts in one powerful dashboard for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analyst at ibkr.com/free PA. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. A 14-year-old, Colt Gray, is under arrest and will be tried as an adult after a school shooting at Appalachian High School in Winder, Georgia, left 4 people dead. 2 14-year-old students and 2 teachers were killed. 9 others were wounded. In May of last year, the FBI received anonymous tips about online threats to shoot up the school. The FBI traced those threatening posts on a gaming site to a then 13-year-old Gray, but found no reason to arrest him. Vice President Harris is putting some daylight between herself and President Biden on the issue of capital gains taxes. Bloomberg Government's Jack Fitzpatrick reports from Washington.
Harris is proposing an increase to 28% capital gains tax for those earning $1 million or more. That's up from the current 20% rate, but nowhere close to Biden's proposal of 39.6%. That's sort of an exception to the rule because Harris has largely talked about increasing taxes on the wealthiest families, the highest earners, corporations, to make up for plans for increased spending on any proposals she's had.
Bloomberg Government's Jack Fitzpatrick. Harris and former President Trump are getting ready for their first debate next week in Philadelphia. Trump was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania last night for an event hosted by Fox News. He said his debate strategy will be to let Harris talk, and he complained about some of the terms of the debate on ABC News.
I agreed to do it because they wouldn't do any other network. The other thing is, her best friend is the head of the network. Her husband's best friend is married to the head of the network. And they're going to get the questions.
Our coverage of the ABC News presidential debate begins Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Wall Street time on a special edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio and Television. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
The Detroit Lions blue button. Our buttons here in the studio, folks, Barr had a tantrum last year. They were sort of a deep maroon, kind of red, golden San Francisco color, and he just had a whole hissy fit. And here we are with Detroit Lions buttons. Let me do a data check here to get us to the 9 o'clock hour. Got a lot more coming up here on the show. The VIX 20 level out to 21.14. Futures flat. Negative 14, now negative 10. SPX futures, NASDAQ down an additional 0.4%. Small cap fractionally goes the other way. The real yield, 1.68%. From New York City across the nation, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red on the screen, and this is after U.S. companies added the fewest jobs last month since the start of 2021, an increase of 99,000. That's according to ADP. And a downside surprise for weekly jobless claims, 227,000 applications filed last week. We get the government's number on August non-farm payrolls tomorrow. So right now we have NASDAQ futures down 0.4%, 90 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 12 points. S&P futures down 0.1% or 10 points. The 2-year yield, 3.72%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.73%, and that's down 2 basis points. To currencies, the dollar weaker. Japanese yen up about 0.4% at 143.06 against the dollar. Euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down about 2.5% at 56,000. Companies making news. That's Volvo. It scaled back its outlook. Rising tariffs hurt some of its models that were made in China. Shares down about 0.2% in Germany. And BMW, they say it plans to start selling hydrogen-powered vehicles in 4 years with Toyota. BMW up about 1% in Germany. We have Toyota down 2% in Japan. And finally, earnings. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise down 4%, weaker than expected margins on its AI server business. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Paul, the hybrid thing is like the winner. I mean, they get the trophy, I guess.
So. Yeah, I think so.
All electric, no. All gas, no.
I don't know.
Hybrid. I mean, that's where we are. Is your Vespa hybrid?
Vespa, I get 150 miles per tank full, Tom.
Per tank full?
Which takes 2
but you're
gallons.
only driving to the liquor store.
Exactly, back and forth to Egan's in downtown the shore. So, but we'll see. Everything's good.
You got the Vespa. They're talking about expanding out another 500 square feet.
I know. It's fantastic.
To get it done. Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney here. On YouTube, thrilled with that. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts on YouTube. On Apple CarPlay, on Android Auto as well. Our radio signal across this nation, including in Washington, 99.1 FM. Bloomberg 1130 here in New York. Good morning. And in Boston, huge signal across most of New England. 92.9 FM in Boston. We say good morning as well as we pick up that wonderful, wonderful coverage. Right now, we pick up a wonderful economist. Julia Pollack is flat out different. She was schooled on the Charles River, I should say, in Boston. Julia Pollack joins us with Zip Recruiter, techie, internet-y West Coast. Just cut to the chase, Julia. What does your recent data say about the American job economy?
So our data showed a very weak July, and everything else is coming out that way too. The JOLTS report this week was way below what economists had expected to see. The Beige Book is also really gloomy. I mean, this is the most downbeat Beige Book I've read in a long time, with companies reporting lower hiring than they had expected at the start of the year. So July was weak. August is actually looking a bit better in our data. So I don't think that the Friday jobs report is going to be that bad.
Right. Is the is the unemployment rate down linear, or like as it ticks higher? Where does Julia Pollack get concerned?
I'm concerned now already. Yes. So when it goes up about 0.5 percentage point, it typically goes up another 2 percentage points after that. The least it goes up typically after that is 1 percentage point. So there are reasons to be concerned. Of course, this time is different. Anytime an economist tells you that, you should run for the exits and be very worried. But the Fed does have a tremendous firepower. 550 basis points of firepower behind it, a lot of flexibility. The question is whether it'll deploy it in time. That's I think the big question mark right now.
Joya, when you speak to your clients at ZipRecruiter, the folks that are actually out there on the front lines hiring, what are they telling you today versus maybe a year ago?
That the availability and quality of labor has improved. So we have seen an increase in job seeker activity and job seeker urgency. Companies are also saying that they aren't facing quite the same wage pressures. So job seekers are telling us that they're more, they feel more financial pressure to take the first offer. So it's getting easier for employers and harder for job seekers. That's the big picture.
Yeah. Julia, Kevin Gordon at Schwab out with a really smart chart out on Twitter, folks. I just retweeted that. I'll try to get it out on LinkedIn as well. Where unit labor costs, the costs of labor wrapped into the productivity study of the nation, revised down from 0.5% to 0.3%. Here's the money phrase, Paul.
Okay.
The lowest since Q4 2013. I mean, that's an extraordinary statistic. Is that lower unit labor cost the technology that ZipRecruiter are so famous for? Is the technology overlay that you focus on every day, Julia Pollack, is that what's really going on here?
Oh, we'll definitely take credit for it. I think there has been better job matching since the pandemic. There was great opportunity for workers to kickstart their careers, to leapfrog and get into better jobs. So retention has gone up, which means that you don't have companies spending so much time hiring people. We also have had huge technological improvements over the past few years. A lot of them are quite recent. This migration of almost every business, including really small businesses, to the cloud has had huge benefits. The adoption of AI. So I think there's reason to be quite bullish on the productivity data. That said, all of the data is in some doubt at the moment because the sort of big denominators are in question, and that's population, the count of the number of people in the country. The CBO expected that there'd be 1 million immigrants in 2023. There were 3 million. And this year, immigration also has probably run higher. And so, we've seen issues with the benchmark revisions and sort of all the other data coming into a little bit of question.
I mean, Paul, this is great. This is beautifully explained. She would sit at a bar in Cambridge and with a Sam Adams in her hand and explain productivity dynamics. Dale Jorgensen once fell off the stool. It was so exciting. That was beautifully explained.
Hey, Julia, Bloomberg Opinion is out with a piece today saying that federal workers need to get back into the office. A government report last year found that 17 of 24 agency headquarters were operating at a capacity of 25% or less, compared with about 50% for office buildings in big metropolitan areas. What are your company recruiting clients, what are they telling you these days about hybrid work from home, back in the office? Where's the new world order these days from your perspective?
So I think this is a really interesting issue with lots of layers. So remote work is here to stay. In every other industry, we see it flat. The one place where we've seen a big decline in remote postings is for government jobs. And there's been a huge backlash against remote work in the government. It started with, Joni Ernst and Republican senators calling them bubble bath bureaucrats, because, of course, there were instances of bureaucrats taking calls with constituents from the bathtub and from bars and from vacations.
Yeah, I do that.
In other industries, employers say that productivity's gone up. Workers roll out of bed at 6 a.m. and log in right away and open their laptops. I think the problem in the government, and one thing we have seen actually is that layoffs and firings are higher for remote workers. So in the private sector, where you can still hold workers' feet to the fire. When they work remotely, they don't work less, often they work more. I think in the public sector, there may be a difference, though. If you can't monitor people physically in person and you can't fire them, then you have a problem. And that, I think, is the issue that the government is confronting.
Don't be a stranger. Julia Pollack, thank you so much. With ZipRecruiter, can't say enough about the wonderful and different perspective she gives us here. As we go to the jobs report tomorrow, that after claims here, basically ADP soggy, claims doing better. It's a churn to the market. I got a little bit of red. Futures negative 9. We say good morning, 92.9 FM Boston, for all of you across the nation. This is really exciting. It's like a ginormous signal, Block Island all the way up. I don't think we get quite to Mount Katahdin.
Okay.
I think it's just before.
All right, I'll take
one of the great songwriters of New England, one of the classics there. It's about Wall Street. James Infantino, Stress.
It's
It's the little things that get you. It's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. It's the little things that get you. It's the little things that get you. It's the little things that get you when you weren't paying attention. I'm trying to cut down all my caffeine consumption, so when I get up, I just have one cup of coffee, and I like to have another cup of coffee with my breakfast. And on the way to work, I like to get a cup of coffee, like the kind of cup of coffee that you get with the donuts. If I never get the donut, I just have the cup of coffee. And when I get to work, I like to have a cup of coffee, because I like to have a coffee when I'm talking on the phone, but it usually goes cold. I need to get another cup of coffee, and it's lunch, and I have an espresso.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo, welcoming all of you across the nation, around the world on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. The best way to get us out of YouTube if you're driving across this nation, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. If you're driving, 99.1 FM, Nathan Hager's station in Clarksburg.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, take the last train to Clarksburg.
Sure.
Great song. Good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, 1130 in New York, 92.9 FM in Boston. Marvin Lowe, State Street, with us here in moments. Santander Bank, Stephen Stanley, always great with detail here on claims. And we just heard this from others, that August is actually doing better. Julia Pollack mentioned that. In sum, the scare of June and July, that was when the Red Sox were doing better. The scare of June and July, when initial and continuing claims jumped, that's a gloomier number, has largely passed, and the pace of layoffs has settled back at a pace only modestly higher.
All right.
So that's sort of like the trend right now.
We'll
into tomorrow's jobs report.
Yeah, we'll be all over that tomorrow.
We'll have to see. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And we've got a mix of red and green on the screen. This is after mixed readings on the labor market. Data showed U.S. companies added the fewest jobs since the start of 2021. Now, meanwhile, the latest jobless claims figures came in below estimates. Now, we have the August jobs report that's due out tomorrow. That's expected to show that U.S. payrolls increased by about 165,000. We shall see. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures down about 0.3%, 60 points. Dow futures, little change, up about 8 points. S&P futures, little change, down about 5 points. We have the 2-year yield at 3.72%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.73%, and that's down 3 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,515 an ounce. Brent crude, $73 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. Deal-making news. Yes, Verizon agreed to buy Frontier Communications. It's an all-cash deal valued at about $20 billion. And that agreement is going to help Verizon expand its high-speed internet service. We have Verizon shares. Their little change, Frontier down about 9%. Shares of Nvidia ticking back lower, down about 0.7%. It's been in contact with the DOJ. That's what it says, but it has not been subpoenaed as part of an antitrust investigation. That's what Nvidia is saying right now. Shares of JetBlue Airways higher, up 4%, raised its sale forecast for the current quarter. They actually said they benefited from rebooking passengers from rival airlines whose flights were impacted by the technology outage in July. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Joining us now, Marvin Lowe, Senior Strategist, State Street, on what we're going to see here forward and also what we see within the investment business. Is there a global slowdown, Marvin Lowe? Can you take China and essentially extrapolate it over to the rest?
Yeah, I mean, for certain, the challenges that China has is going to affect overall global trade. Some countries and some parts of the world more than others, and I think you're starting to see that bifurcation in terms of who gets more affected by that slowdown. But for sure, I mean, we've been on a multi-year tightening process across all of these central banks. It's going to have an impact.
Marvin, what are you telling your clients about election risk, 2024 election coming up in just a matter of weeks here? How are you framing out the risks there?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that the polls are as challenging as they are to read, it's hard to put bets on there. I think we're talking about various scenarios that are out there. In all cases, however, and this is a little bit more of in an intermediate term kind of discussion, whether or not increased deficits from either party would require more term premium kind of going into various parts of the Treasury curve. Just the debt sustainability discussion being real this time rather than just something that we've been worrying about for the last 30 years.
The ebb and flows here, Marvin Lowe, I just think are extraordinary. And some of the nuances, for example, today we talk about Steve Stanley at Santander just mentioned June-July slowdown. Well, maybe there's a pickup. Where is Marvin Lowe's nominal and real GDP forward for the United States? What are those two statistics?
Yeah, I mean, I still think a soft landing is possible. Kind of hearing some of your prior guests say that there's still an ebb and flow around the jobs data as we kind of get into the end of summer, pushing back a little bit against a number that was hurricane affected the month before. The data for sure is moving in the Fed's direction. There definitely is slowing growth, and the long and policy lags are making their way into the economy. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. The real question we're asking, is this time different? And or should we worry about what we hope for in terms of rate cuts and the Fed being behind the curve? I think we're still looking at trend growth and potentially slightly above trend growth.
Given that backdrop, what do you think, or how do you think the Federal Reserve should proceed once we
That's the money
chat
question.
with
I mean, forget about Jobs Day.
September
the money
18th.
question, Paul, is 50 beeps or 25 beeps.
Exactly right, Tom. So how do you think the Fed should proceed, Marvin?
Yeah, I mean, so much is riding on tomorrow's number. Confirmation as to whether or not they're behind the curve, or if we're going into a glide pattern, if you will. I think 25 is the data. The data that I'm looking at still makes me believe that everything is consolidating the way they would want. So 25 for the remainder of this year, and then kind of getting into a more regular cadence going into next year. If we do get confirmation, however, that maybe some of the more concerning jobs numbers are really emerging from a slowdown perspective, then you get 50s. And the challenge for the market right now is once we start pricing in 50, because jobs are really decelerating quickly, you've got to get a lot more 50s kind of in that discussion.
You know, Marvin, I want to look at this technology overlay, and I know you're doing a strategy thing. It's an inappropriate question, but come on, Paul. Director of Research.
Thank you, Tom.
Hambrecht and Quist.
Nice.
Remember,
That's very good.
Lisa, you have no idea who Hambrecht and Quist is.
No.
Sounds like a bar in San Francisco, right?
Yes.
Marvin Lowe was a bartender at Hambrecht and Quist a few years ago. How do you overlay Mag 7, Mag 8, Marvin Lowe, onto American business strategy?
There's a reason that these businesses exist in the U.S. and only in the U.S. There's a reason that the S&P, the Nasdaq, however you want to define the definition of like successful American businesses, have outperformed the rest of the world. I think these are special companies that do incredible things, not only to their sector, but to the world and how the world interacts with each other. And that ultimately is something that is a sustainable strength in the U.S. And I really hope for that from a political discussion perspective, they do nothing to really jeopardize that.
He just gave you permission to buy 4 iPhones, Paul.
Exactly. I'm ready to go.
Where you're going.
Marvin, as a global macro strategist, where do you see some of the best opportunities here? Is it worth spending time outside the U.S. for our investors?
I still buy into the idea of U.S. exceptionalism. I think we're certainly in a period of heightened uncertainty, and really kind of shedding risk premium in a world where the outlook is as uncertain as it is. Kind of makes sense. But if you are more intermediate term looking, you can turn your heads away from the screen for a couple hours, if you will. It's hard for all of us. I think that there are still certain parts of the growth profile that still looks good. I do like that technology discussion that you keep bringing up, Tom.
We'll do it again. Marvin Lowe, thank you so much. We got to get him back on here again. It's great. I mean, you look at his resume, and it's like a wonderful walk across technology Wall Street with Pershing years ago, and
Hamburg.
Small firm called Fidelity.
Sure.
You should see his seats at Fenway Park. They're on sale this morning.
I'm sure they are.
The least. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The 14-year-old suspect in the Appalachia High School shooting had been questioned by law enforcement prior to yesterday's murder of 2 students and 2 teachers. Monroe County, Georgia Sheriff Judd Smith.
I don't know why it happened. I may not ever know. We may not ever know.
Sheriff Smith says the suspect, Colt Gray, dropped to the ground and surrendered when confronted by 2 school resource officers. Gray is being tried as an adult. Former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris on the road with the days dwindling ahead of next week's big debate. Trump fielding questions at a Fox News town hall in Pennsylvania painted a dark picture of the current state of the nation and blamed the Biden administration.
With these clowns that you have in there now, you're going to end up having World War III. If she gets in, I think we will have a depression, 1929 style depression. That's what I think will happen to our country.
Meanwhile, Harris called for a 28% capital gains tax rate on people earning $1 million or more.
We will tax capital gains at a rate that rewards investment in America's innovators, founders, and small businesses.
Harris spoke at an event in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. In Ukraine, lawmakers have approved President Volodymyr Zelensky's new foreign minister, Andrei Sybiha. He replaces Dmytro Kuleba as Ukraine's top diplomat as part of the biggest cabinet reshuffle since Russia's invasion in 2022. Bloomberg's Greg Sullivan has more from Dubai.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he wants a new emphasis both in domestic and foreign policy. The move still caught Western allies, Ukraine's Western allies, off guard with its suddenness, but there's no doubt that there is a crucial time for Ukraine.
Bloomberg's Greg Sullivan reports Russia is targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure before winter And Ukraine's forces are struggling to hold back a Russian offensive in the east. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Red and green on the screen right now. The VIX 20.83. Ian Lingen publishes a short note for him from BMO Capital Markets. Lingen is just absolutely outstanding. Final revisions to unit labor costs, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Non-farm productivity improved to 2.5%. It was a mix of data that has reinforced the recent bull steepening.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Well, I'm looking at the 2-year Treasury, 3.71%. Tom, the 10-year, 3.72.
I mean,
how about that?
I don't know.
Most of the last time we were the term is disinverted, I was told.
Yeah, I'll go
I thought
with
just not inverted, but it's disinverted.
No, it's disinverted is what we would use, but the real yield, it really hasn't broken down. 1.67%, the 10-year inflation-adjusted yield that I use. There's a bunch of other ones I don't understand. But the answer is, Paul, you need the real yield to break down, and then you go, OMG, we're going to have a lower rate regime, and I would say that's the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. And you need mortgage rates for a lot of folks to come down. The Mortgage Bankers Association,
where are they?
Yesterday or a couple of days ago, just put it at 6.43%, which is obviously down from close to 8% back in 2023.
Do you see effervescence out there with exuberance?
I've been outbid. There was a house on the market for $600,000. I got outbid by a bid for $770,000.
Oh,
Can you believe that?
Say that again. It was $660.
It was on the market for $600. It went for $770.
And this is New Jersey. We're not talking
is this like
the Bahamas.
Is this east or west of Mount Katahdin?
Exactly.
It's nuts.
There's just nothing out there. And so
Sassower's wired in, north of New York, and he says it's nuts.
No, yeah. Well, his wife she's a big player up there.
Oh, is she a big player?
Yes,
up there?
in the real estate up there in Westchester.
Oh, okay. Does Damien does he walk the kids to school? Probably looking at his cell phone. He's probably looking at
got him on a golf cart.
He's on a golf course.
Yeah, they take a golf cart. That's exactly right. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got little movement in futures. This is after investors received some more economic data to consider ahead of tomorrow's jobs report. Right now, NASDAQ futures down about 0.2%, 54 points. We have Dow futures, little change, up 33 points. S&P futures, little change, down about a point. We have the 2-year yield, 3.72%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year, 3.73%, and that's down 2 basis points. To currencies, we have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, up about 0.3% at 143.23 against the dollar. The euro, British pound stronger. We have Bitcoin down nearly 2.5% at 56,000. What's moving the markets? It's software company C3 AI. It's down about 19%. Subscription revenue, the first quarter, weaker than expected. And Hewlett Packard Enterprise, they're down about 5%, weaker than expected margins on its AI server business. And finally, I want to check in with shares of U.S. Steel. They're up about 2%. X, there you go, ticker X. Sources say President Biden preparing to block Nippon Steel's takeover of the company. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
Could U.S. Steel be bailed out if Elon Musk just bought the stock symbol?
X, there you go.
I mean, I'm just asking for a friend. Elon, thanks for listening this morning. So this is the Bloomberg World, folks. We welcome all of you across the nation this morning. Paul and I, we're like glued here. We're like, Lisa and bars in the Gulf Stream to San Francisco. Paul and I are just glued here. Ira Jersey, our rate strategist, is with Eric Kozetsky and Erica Edelberg.
Smart
She's
trio.
pure mathematics, Chicago.
Yep.
These are like fixed income Bloomberg. These are like adults. They're in a bar in Memphis. A rate strategist, MBS strategist, and a muni strategist walk into a bar in Memphis. Finish the joke.
What could go wrong there?
I would suggest they extend duration. Bada boom, and we'll leave it at that. We welcome all of you. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene here. Really getting into tomorrow's jobs report. Important. We heard Julia Pollack talk about the denominator that we really don't know. We don't know the immigration dynamics, Paul, in the nation of 150, whatever it is, million employed.
Yeah, exactly right, Tom. And a lot of economists have said many of those immigrants are finding jobs, they're working, and then they're spending that disposable income. And so it's been a net positive for the labor market, net positive for GDP growth.
Consumption.
Let's see how that plays out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, just as simple as that. Where's Atlanta GDP now? It's ticking up recently. This is the big surprise for me today, folks. You say, okay, what's the nuance on a Thursday as we all come back from the summer? And the Atlanta GDP is 2.09, and there was some gloom about sub 2, and it's just holding on.
Holding on there. And people are buying vehicles out there. Ford U.S. Auto sales for August, 183,000 vehicles, up 13.4% year over year. I bet you the vast majority of those are those Ford F-150 trucks. The Ford Bronco, I see that thing everywhere.
I see it everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And
it's not a real, I mean, I grew up in a Bronco family. I'm like, it's not real.
No,
it's selling.
It looks good, and people say they love it. So, but I don't know. It's all about the trucks. I don't know where we are with the EV transition. It seems to have stalled out a little bit. I don't know.
They're in my ear. We got to do this. Mandeep's on his way up, folks. We'll have Mandeep Singh with us here. I'm told in a moment. Why am I wearing the Red Sox coat? For those of you on radio, you're blessed, because on YouTube I got the Red Sox coat on, which we wore the first week of April with our Yankees coats and our Detroit Tigers coats and all that, and it's over.
It's over for the
The only, to their great credit with the stupid wild card where almost every team makes it.
Right.
With this fiction of the wild card, they were in it to early September, or actually the third week of August, and then it all fell apart. I don't get it.
Okay.
They have the 5th largest fan base, like attendance or whatever, last year. And they've improved on last year. They played, sub 500 ball last year, but I mean, it's the Red Sox. They should be doing better.
They should be doing better. I mean, they had such a great run there. They ran into the buzzsaw, which is the New York Mets over the past.
They did. That is
a week and a half, and that's
you.
8 wins in a row or something for the Metis.
Do you know I have a tattoo on my left arm here? You've never seen it.
Never seen that. Lisa, have you seen that?
No. Of what?
Oh no, it says Dykstra. It's off 1986. Mandeep Singh now on technology. Mandeep, let's just go broad here. And I have trouble because I do a fancy exponential pro chart on Nvidia, and Nvidia has gone up so far so fast. On my chart, long-term support is $67 a share. I mean, I don't want you to be a technical analyst, but how do you digest the hiccup of Nvidia the last couple days?
I mean, anytime you see, such a run-up where a stock went from, in this case, $1 trillion in market cap to $3 trillion,
right.
And for good reasons. I think the fundamentals have been very supportive, but people will always extrapolate things out in the future where the law of large numbers catches up. And right now what's priced in the market is the story is far to the right and up, and it will continue that way. And I think that's where the reality will come into play in terms of the top line growth slowing. But there's no
I'm
change
sorry,
in their mode.
I'm going to interrupt here. I have a crossing moving average. 2004, 20 years ago, was a quarterly chart bull signal on a small stock from Cupertino. How many times along the way did someone rationalize a law of large numbers with Apple Computer?
Yeah, but for every Apple, there are a number of other software companies that haven't played out that way. So we can always find examples where it worked.
It's called Intel.
So there are a number of other IPOs where people were extremely bullish about the story, and they didn't turn out to be, $1 trillion market cap companies. So I think, again, Nvidia has a clear mode. This is a large market. This is a super cycle. And I think there is every reason to be bullish.
Quarterly chart, Paul. Intel, I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's flat for the same chart of Apple back to 2004.
It's just amazing.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Exactly. All right. Next week, the market-moving event is I am upgrading from the iPhone 11 to the 16. Okay, I don't know which one, whatever. So Tim Cook, he's been made aware of this. Talk to it. How important is this phone to Apple, or is it just another upgrade?
Well, I mean, we all know everyone is looking forward to a bigger refresh cycle because of the Gen AI aspect and the fact that Apple is not one of the largest spenders on CapEx, unlike its Mag 7 peers, which are heavily spending on CapEx to buy these Nvidia chips. And the bet is Apple owns the distribution. So because of that, if they are able to offer a phone where you can run Gen AI chatbots and copilots, then they will participate.
Right.
They will be able to boost their services segment. Now, for that to happen, they need a phone that can run these Gen AI models. And I think that's what they will showcase.
See, that's what I'm doing, Lisa. I'm going to be running Gen AI
No, but
models
this
on my
is the
phone.
problem. We're going to run out of time here, but 5G was the second coming of man. It wasn't. Okay, Paul Sweeney's going to be using ChatGPT.
Sure.
Down at, what's the name of the liquor store?
Egan's.
Egan's.
Yep.
Is he going to be using ChatGPT?
Everyone is
at Egan's?
already using Gen AI, but the Gen AI is being used from the cloud. Apple's bet is you are going to use Gen AI on your phone so that it's personalized to your data as opposed to running things on the cloud. That's a big bet.
That's a big bet. I'm all in on that. You see that, Lisa?
Well, wait a minute. Don't get up. What's your bet on this? Is Apple going to win on this?
I think Apple has every reason to do well just because they own the distribution. I mean, you are locked into Apple ecosystem. It's so hard to move out of it because all your data is across Apple devices.
I dropped Afterthought off yesterday at school. 110% of the returning students had the stupid white things in their ear.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, you're like, oh my God, you're back at school. Nobody's listening.
Nope.
They're all like listening to their tunes, hanging out.
It's a new world.
Oh, thank you, Ari. AirPods.
AirPods.
That's
There you
what's
go.
under the couch.
Yep. There you go.
Mandeep Singh on short notice. Thank you so much for joining us. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. I'm waiting for Paul, for the phone companies to come out here. T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, and the rest.
Back in the day, they would subsidize you. Not so much anymore.
Here's T-Mobile right now. iPhone 15, that's the old one.
Yep.
Get 4 on us.
Yes.
It's like the merch at the Red Sox. It's discounted this morning. Good morning, Nationwide, 92.9 FM Boston. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. Now, some news on the labor market as we head into this Thursday trading. ADP reports American businesses added the fewest jobs in 3 years, 99,000 last month. But U.S. job cuts, that remains low. Weekly jobless claims fell to 227,000. How will the markets react to all this information ahead of tomorrow's monthly employment report? Let's get right to it with the S&P 500. Little changed, up about a point at 5,522. We have the Dow up 0.2%, 108 points, 41,074. The NASDAQ down 0.1%, 19 points at 17,065. We have the 2-year yield at 3.72%, down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.73%, and that's down 2 basis points. As far as commodities, we have spot gold higher, 2,519 an ounce. Brent crude, $73 a barrel. WTI crude, $69 a barrel. At the open, I want to check in with C3AI, that software company, because it's been moving the markets before the bell. Right now, it is down 16%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is your Bloomberg Opening Bell Report. Tom and Paul.
Yeah, Lisa, thanks so much. A couple housekeeping notes here as we get to our next guest. Huge good time, and it should be a long interview. We've got to get him back here again. Pramal Dalwin with us, head of emerging markets portfolio, PIMCO, with a real vision about the shifts in the global investment landscape. Nobody cares. All we care about, I learned this, I did a thing up at Fenway years ago, a couple years ago, back when they won. And, I realized like Liverpool within the ownership of the Fenway Sports Group is actually bigger than the Red Sox own. It's like
Is that right?
huge,
Okay,
worldwide,
I
it's
know.
like a huge deal.
Global brand.
Promo, let me just cut to the chase. They can't let Salah go, can they? That's un-American.
They can't, and I don't think they will. I don't think he wants to go, and I think ultimately they'll make
Record money?
Yeah, I mean, I think his contract's pretty good. He's a top paid player at the club, and I probably think he'll get a 2-year extension. If the owners are listening, I encourage them to sort it out as soon as they can.
Tom, Liverpool just beat Man U. That's Manchester
Well,
United.
yeah, but Man U is
3-0. Is what they say.
They're going to be relegated. They go down. They're going to go through the
Okay.
Champions League down to the. Farrow briefs me on this.
Okay.
Oh, this came up. Somebody emailed in. No, John Farrow does not have Oasis Wembley tickets.
He does
Somebody
not,
thought
okay.
He did. Okay, Promo. Let's go to the core PIMCO issue, which is finally a shift to international investment. How is that correlated with trend on U.S. dollar? Do I need weak dollar to make you happy in EM?
Well, I think you don't need a strong dollar, first and foremost. The dollar just has to stop appreciating. There's a bunch of carry embedded in these currencies, and you can sort of realize that as the dollar stops strengthening. And that's our base case view here. The dollar's been a high-yielding currency. It's sucked capital away from international markets. And it sort of stands to reason that, we're on the precipice of this rate-cutting cycle. Probably going to get back down to 3.5%, somewhere sort of in the neutral sphere. And then that moves the dollar away from this high-yielding status back to sort of in line with the rest of the developed world.
Local currency debt, that's where we should be looking at. I'm looking at a Bloomberg News note out recently, article. What local currency debt should I be looking at?
Well, there's a few countries that slightly off the beaten path that we think are quite interesting. Peru.
That's where they're emerging.
Exactly. Peru is one of them.
Peru, really?
Yeah. It's got a treasury curve, 2/10 slope. It's almost 200 basis points, the steepest in the world. For an investment-grade credit, you can carry and roll down on a 10-year bond with a managed currency regime. We like that a lot. We like South Africa. Just gone through an election. You've taken that off the table now.
Okay.
So you've got a few years of stability on that front, low inflation, and a supportive central bank there as well. So I think those two make sense from a local rates perspective. We also like Turkey as well at this juncture, sort of making a shift.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got to go there. It's totally idiosyncratic. 34 on lira, right now 33.96 as well. I've been waiting since time began. There's a lot of people with you on this, pros saying now.
Yeah.
Is your optimism on Turkey, Erdogan finally caves to capitalism? Is your optimism that their treasury and central bank can persist in being an adult? How does that happen? How do you go long Turkey?
Yeah, it only happens from the guy at the top changing his mind. And we think that's sort of already started to happen and likely going to continue. I think the losses in the municipal elections was a big shock for him.
Yeah.
He lost his core constituent base, which is not the urban part of Istanbul and Ankara, it's the rural parts of Turkey. And basically he lost it because of a cost of living crisis. Real disposable income declined substantially in that country. And it's going to happen when you're increasing minimum wage at 40% a year, every year. But they've stopped increasing minimum wage. June was the first time that they've stopped mandatory minimum wage hikes. And you're starting to see the disinflation process working. We've gone from 62% to 52% in inflation, still way too high, but there is a path to getting inflation back down to the teens and to the high single digits. And this year, it's been the best performing emerging market currency, almost 20% total return this year, and we think that that's set to continue.
Mexican peso, what has happened there?
Yeah, it's been a tough one. It's caught between a little bit of a rock and a hard place. Firstly, on tariffs in the U.S. election, clearly Mexico...
But isn't Mexico benefiting from the friendshoring and onshoring? Aren't we getting all our stuff from Mexico these days?
For sure. It has. It's benefited from reorientation of supply chains, not just from international companies, but also from Chinese companies moving supply chains there. That is a long-term positive story for the country. The problem is in the near term, U.S. elections and tariffs, and you have these judicial reforms that are getting voted in at the moment, which are sort of near-term negatives.
The basic idea is in 1998, after 234, thank you, Ecuador crises, EM learned its lessons and decided they weren't going to dollarize, they were going to do more responsible approaches, and things were better, more stable. What is the shadow in EM right now? Is it leverage? Is it a private credit structure that we don't understand? What's the mystery out there for EM you worry about?
Yeah, so post-Asia financial crisis, they really did three things. They fiscally consolidated, they moved to inflation targeting central banks, and like you said, they let the currencies be the shock absorber. And largely, they haven't deviated away from that path. They've taken a DM playbook and they've imposed it onto the emerging markets. So I don't think there are skeletons in the closet. This is just an unfamiliarity asset class. It's an asset class that people don't need to own. It's an asset class that's had massive amounts of outflows, record amounts of outflows over the last 3 years.
How do the inflows shift? That's the arch question.
They shift when the Fed normalizes policy rates. We can empirically tie it to financial conditions, but more succinctly to money market rates.
Well, I assume that's a nonlinear trend. At what point, I don't need it to do decimal points. Stay with one, but I'm kidding. But at what point does the Fed trajectory change how Singapore does business?
Yeah, I don't think it changes ultimately how Singapore does business, but EMs as a bunch of capital deficit countries, they need to have international capital flowing. And the reality is it hasn't. It's gone towards this US exceptionalism story that you guys were talking about earlier. Right. And that's been the right trade for the past decade, uniformly.
What do we do, or more importantly, what do you guys do in emerging markets with China?
Yeah, I mean, China for us is a story where we don't see a lot of interesting investment opportunities. We think it is a story where they are oversupplying the global inventory markets, and that's going to likely continue. But there are diminishing returns to that.
Right.
Growth is slowing, inflation is coming down in that current country, and we think that the only path there, the only trade that we think really makes sense is a depreciating currency.
I took afterthought to school yesterday, and we're having the overpriced bagel.
Yep.
Out at, I call it Dangerous Provisions. It's a beautiful shop, 96 in Madison.
Okay.
Just really, really nice place. A guy comes up and he asks this question: when does the FDI come into China? And critically, politically, is Beijing dependent on Western investment coming back into China?
It is critically dependent on that. If you think about their economy just at a very sort of simplistic basis, they cannot undo the one-child policy. Korea and Japan sort of tell us that. They're the analogies. And if you can't immigrate high-skilled labor, then you're sort of very reliant on your export engine, which is why I sort of think the conflict between the US and China, it's there, but it's slightly overplayed.
So we're out of time. Let's close the loop. Do you assume that Beijing in some way will cave and save face and regenerate FDI into China?
I think they have to. It's their only escape from this middle income trap that they have.
Can Liverpool beat Nottingham here? They're off for 2 weeks.
Two-week break for the internationals. I
Nottingham is tough. Look what they did to the Tots.
2 week break for internationals. What the hell is that?
Yeah,
it's like a British.
I don't know what I can't keep track.
Yeah, I can't. Nottingham is a difficult team.
Yeah, it's an up-and-coming team.
Okay, don't be a stranger. This is great. Cromwell Down, thank you so much. She's with Pacific Investment Management Company, a small shop out in Newport Beach. Red and green on the screen. We're open for trading. SPX fractionally up. NASDAQ green on the screen. Whoa. The VIX 20.71 as well. 10-year yield in a little bit, 3.73%. With our news in New York City, M. Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. Were there warning signs missed before a teen allegedly shot up his high school in Georgia, killing 2 students and 2 teachers? The suspected shooter, a 14-year-old student at the school, was taken into custody after surrendering and is said to be speaking with investigators. Colt Gray will be tried as an adult. Jillian Peterson is executive director of the Violence Prevention Project Research Center.
There's typically a large number of warning signs leading up to these horrific events. So I think in this case, we'll be looking for what were the warning signs, what was missed, how do we do better in the future to not miss those signs.
Jillian Peterson with the Violence Prevention Project Research Center. With the presidential debate next Tuesday, former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are getting ready for their first face-to-face. The rules are now set for the 90-minute debate on ABC. The candidates' microphones will be muted when it is not their turn to speak. Bloomberg will carry the debate live with our coverage starting at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. Former Republican Representative Liz Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris for president. Speaking at an event at Duke University, Cheney said that is because of the danger that Donald Trump poses.
And as a conservative, as someone who believes in and cares about the Constitution, I have thought deeply about this.
Liz Cheney was co-chair of the House investigation into the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Attorney General Merrick Garland says attempts by Russia to influence the 2024 presidential election have brought 2 indictments and warnings from the Justice Department.
The Justice Department is seizing 32 internet domains that the Russian government and the Russian-sponsored actors have used to engage in a covert campaign to interfere and influence the outcome of our country's elections.
The Biden administration also says Russia tried to peddle pro-Russian propaganda, especially related to the war in Ukraine. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
You got to get in front of this, folks, because the Gulfstream, he's going out of Middletown, not Teterboro, but Michael Barr. I mean, I'm sorry, the Jets, there's a real buzz to the Jets. I mean, Damian's always optimistic, but it's a different Jets team.
They got a good
right?
defense. They have a strong defense. And I won't, this is the only time I'll make the reference, playing fantasy is one of the top 3 defenses out there.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Okay.
One is San Francisco, I think 2 or 3 are the Jets.
I'm out of the loop on this. Is Mr. Rogers participating this year?
Yes.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
If he doesn't get hurt in the
He hasn't
first
played in a couple of years. I mean, it's been.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
And he's 40-something, right?
Yeah.
I had the same problem.
Exactly. Exactly. So we'll see. But it's a highly anticipated game. Monday night, it'll get huge ratings.
Oh, yeah.
So
So
there's a lot of good games this weekend. So
yeah, I want to see Levi. Everybody says it's a great stadium just to sit back and party.
It's beautiful. It's fantastic, and that whole Santa Clara, San Jose area is absolutely.
It's a return for the Jets coach. I mean, he's going back there. He knows it. He was a defensive coordinator for them. So wait, there's Mohamed Salah. Was Liverpool?
Yeah, but this is Robert Saleh. Yeah, he's the head coach of the Jets. Former defensive coordinator for the San Francisco Giants. So how about that?
Where are you on the 50-yard line, like 6 seats up from Mohammed?
That's where I am.
You should see where Mohammed. Alarian, the tickets he gets. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Bloomberg. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 24 hours a day. 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 7 days a we
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got stocks mixed after a mixed reading on the labor market. Data showed U.S. companies added fewest jobs since the start of 2021. Now, meanwhile, the weekly jobs claim figures came in below estimates. Tomorrow, well, we have more. We have on tap. We have the August jobs report. So right now we have the NASDAQ up about 0.5%, 97 points. But the Dow down 0.2%, 97 points. The S&P 500 little changed, up about 2 points. The 2-year yield 3.72%. That's down 3 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.73%, and that's down 2 basis points. We have the dollar weaker, Japanese yen stronger, up about 0.3%. 143.23 against the dollar. Euro British pound stronger. Bitcoin down about 2% at 56,000. Shares of Ford down 1%. What U.S. vehicle sales jumped 13.4% last month. A big part of that, yeah, that F-Series truck, hybrid models, that really helped it out. And JetBlue down up 6%. It raised its sale forecast for the current quarter. And finally, Verizon, we'll check in with those shares, are down about 1%. It agreed to buy Frontier Communications about $9.59 billion. We have Frontier down about 8%, but be sure, tune in here at 11 a.m. Wall Street time. Bloomberg Technology sits down with Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg. That's coming up. For more on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. We say good morning to all of you across the nation. Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. Especially excited about a ginormous signal at night. Okay, the ionosphere bounces off.
That's what I
sometimes,
hear. Yep.
You know, when you're tuning in 92.9 FM, you can get Buffalo radio.
Oh,
it's like that.
Okay.
You know, like the stars are crossing up on the ionosphere.
love it.
We say good morning, 92.9 FM. Someone working off the grind in Boston with Eaton Vance. And of course, with Morgan Stanley's Craig Brandon as well. Craig, I know you took the Kool-Aid at Canisius College years ago on the Bills, and the answer is, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the Bills, I'm looking at the Dolphins, I'm looking at the Patriots, I'm looking at the Jets. Can we all agree among good people it's the weakest division in the NFL?
Oh, I don't know if it's the weakest, but it's a toss-up, right? I mean, a lot of restructuring on the Bills, the Jets. Who knows what Aaron Rodgers is going to do? The Dolphins. I think the Patriots are sort of the
Right.
weaker team there, but I mean, I think the AFC East is a toss-up this year.
It's great to talk to you with a long-term perspective of Eaton Vance. We welcome all again in Boston, 92.9 FM. And Craig Brandon, at the bottom of your research note is you're doing work on commercial real estate. So someone as simple as me goes, that office tower across Lexington Avenue went under. That means less taxes for the city or the state. Is that a juvenile way to look at it? How grim is it going to be for municipalities?
I mean, that's really, your 35,000-foot view. And I get a lot of questions about that, which is why, our research team spends time looking at that issue. But from my perspective, when you really drill down into it, the municipal market is very broad, right? When you look at what the municipal market is, it's only about 15% local government general obligation bonds, right? Those are your cities, your towns, things like that.
Really?
It's only 15% of the market. Half of that are local school districts, right? Any school district issues debt, and they're considered local government debt. So you're thinking give or take 7% of the index is what you would traditionally think of cities, towns. But then you look at the cities and towns that really have the commercial real estate issue. It's the New Yorks, it's the Bostons, Chicago's, the San Francisco's, the big cities. So again, that's a smaller subset of the municipal market, right? We like to sometimes call it the tax-exempt market instead of the municipal market. Because remember, colleges and universities, hospitals, nursing homes, water and sewer, public power, transit systems, airports, right? It's really an infrastructure market instead of a municipal market is how we like to say it. So true municipalities, when you think of munis, it's really, about 7% of the market when you take school districts out. So from that perspective, it worries me a little less when I look at the math behind it. Remember, if you get into the weeds, right, somewhere like New York City. So, my research team has been stress testing various revenue scenarios. And, my background, I started my career at the Ways and Means Committee in New York, in Albany. So I spent a lot of time looking at local government finance. So if you stress test New York City and you take the assessed value of all commercial real estate in New York City down 25%, which is a big drop, it's only about 1.5% hit in city revenues, right? Because the revenue base in New York City is pretty broad based. So when you really drill down into it, is it an issue? Yes, it's something we're watching. Does it keep me up at night? It doesn't keep me up.
I feel better, Paul.
Exactly. Hey, Craig, in the municipal space, the real story this year has been municipal high yield debt up 6.59% total return. Why? What's going on there?
It's really just purely a technical play, right? Munis are very retail driven, and when the money's going out, people say you have to sell, right? And the money's coming in, you have to buy. Well, high yield is not, there's two ways to get yield, through credit and through duration. The duration on that index is about 9, right? That's pretty big. So if you think rates are going down and you're looking for a way to benefit from lower rates and take some duration risk, an asset class with 9% duration is pretty good. Muni default rates are low, right? We're not really worried about muni credit right now. So, and it's a supply and demand. So year to date, we've got about $10 billion has come in the high yield market, and issuance is half of what it's been over the last 5 years. So it's just a pure technical play where when we're seeing high yield deals get done, these things are 10, 20 times oversubscribed. And at the break, they'll run up 10, 20, 30 basis points at the break. So it's really a technical thing driving high yield munis right now.
I got one final question, Craig, and I could just see Dose Gardner walking into your office after a killer quarter at Eaton Vance a number of years ago. What is it like having a Buffalo Bills pennant up at Eaton Vance in Boston? I mean, do you have security that helps you with that? Does it disappear?
I've kept that up there for the last 20 years through the lean years, through the Tom Brady years, through all the Super Bowls. It's finally my time. And by the way, there's a few Jets fans on the desk too. So we have Patriots, Bills, and we have Jets on the desk here. And there's even probably a few Giants fans floating around out there, but they're not in the AFC.
A twisted firm, to say the least. Eaton Vance, thank you so much. Craig Brandon, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated today with Morgan Stanley. And, of course, Eaton Vance Management there, taking advantage of tax-free bonds. We're taking advantage of data checks. We do that off the Bloomberg Launchpad. Red and green in the screen. NASDAQ with what I'm going to call a bounce. Up 0.3%, 53 points. Dow, red and green there, just back and forth. But the VIX really tells a story, folks. This is what we started with this morning. We don't have a VIX of the early August agony through 30 out to the fear, the panic that we saw with the 60-level VIX. After what we've seen the last 2 days, the VIX 20.45 in almost a stick right now. So it's at least a lot different than we saw in August. Bitcoin 56,000 as well. I'm sure Paul Sweeney and Alex Steele will address that as they will in the 10 o'clock hour. 2-10 spread. When was the last time I said this? Positive. It's just team swing. It's not even 1 basis point, but we'll take it. A curve inversion this morning, and the real yield 1.67% as well. I got an email. You're ignoring New Jersey. Stop talking about Boston. We get a Helix report from surveillance congestion correspondent John Tucker.
It's congested.
Does the traffic come back?
What do you mean, does it come back?
After
summer?
Yeah.
Well, it never went away. So
it's not worse at the Helix.
I would say more people are coming back into the office, and there's a renewed effort to do that, I would say. I would posit for New York City. So, more commuters.
What would you do in the tunnel in New Jersey if water started coming in?
You would step on the accelerator pedal? I don't know. Oh, by the way, I'd like to point out Power Broker, Caro's book, 50 years old, believe it or not. The must-read for every true New Yorker.
Honor to speak to him years ago. We thank you so much. Jobs Day tomorrow, and of course we'll do that across this nation till Tuesday. Good morning.